you. Laura or staff, do we want to send the link again to Alders, Harrington, McKinney, and Carter?
Yes, I will resend those right now.
Thank you.
Okay, I just resent and then sent them a follow-up email just to confirm that they've received them.
Thank you. Alder Carter is on her way.
Looks like we do have Alder Harrington McKinney on right now.
Thank you. All right, we'll just give Alder Carter a minute more. Okay, looks like we've got Alder Carter now as well. So we'll call to order the Finance Committee meeting of Monday, July 20th, 2020. I will ask staff to mute themselves, mute everyone. And Laura, would you call the roll, please?
Alder Carter. Alder Furman.
Present.
Alder Furman is here. Alder Kimball.
Here.
Alder Kimball's here. Alder Harrington McKinney.
Present.
Alder Harrington McKinney is here. Alder Moreland.
Here.
Alder Moreland is here. Alder Verveer.
Here.
Alder Verveer is here. Alder Carter.
Present.
Alder Carter is here. Mayor Rhodes Conway.
Present.
Mayor, you have quorum.
Thank you. All right. We'll have our tech facilitator read the instructions, please.
Okay, welcome to our virtual meeting. If you lose connection at any point during the meeting, you can reconnect by clicking the link or calling the number in your original email. Committee members, if you're able, please activate your video and keep it on for the duration of the meeting. Staff, if you're able, please activate your video and when you're speaking. The chair, clerk, and tech facilitator are responsible for muting and unmuting committee members. Please use the raise hand feature when you'd like to be recognized to speak, ask questions, or request a roll call vote. During any roll call, all panelists will be unmuted briefly. Staff, please utilize the raise hand function when you're asked a question. The chair will do their best to call on committee members in the order in which hands are raised. Lowering your hand will take you out of the queue. Members of the public who have registered to speak, the name you entered in Zoom must match the name that you entered in registration. If your name does not match, please leave and re-enter the Zoom meeting with the correct name. You will remain muted until called upon. The clerk will tell you when your time is up. After speaking, a member of the body may ask you a question. If you need to share documentation with the committee, please send it to the email listed on today's agenda. Mayor, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Are there any disclosures or recusals from the body on any of our agenda items today? Seeing none, we'll move to the consent agenda. We have registrations or requests on items 17, 18, 20, and 21. Are there any additional items that members of the body wish to have excluded from the consent agenda? All right, seeing none, I will note that we have one registrant on item 19, Tiffany Kenny of the Central Business Improvement District is registered in support, not wishing to speak. And Alder Harrington McKinney.
I'd like to add item number 14.
Item 14 will be added. Alder Verveer.
Thank you, Mayor. I have questions about items 2 and 3, please.
Items 2 and 3 will be added. All right. Any additional items that members of the body wish to remove from the consent agenda? Alder Moreland.
Item number 4, just have clarifying questions.
Item number 4. Any additional items to be excluded from the consent agenda? All right. Again, we did have one registrant on item 19 not wishing to speak. Are there any questions for Tiffany Kenny on item 19? All right, seeing none. Alder Carter, a motion on the consent agenda. We are currently excluding items 2, 3, 4, 14, 17, 18, 20, and 21.
I move the consent agenda.
Thank you. Alder Revere, a second.
Second.
Moved and seconded to pass the consent agenda with the recommendations as noted. Is there any questions or discussion? Is there any objection to recording unanimous vote on the consent agenda? Seeing no objection, we'll record a unanimous vote on the consent agenda. And we'll come to item number 2, which is Register 61254, adopting and confirming the labor agreement between the City of Madison and Teamsters Local 695. Alder Carter, a motion.
Item number 2. I move adopting item number 2.
Alder
And-
Revere.
Second.
Item number 2 is moved and seconded. Alder Harrington McKinney, did you have questions on this one?
No, mine was 14.
I'm sorry. That was you, Alder Revere. My apologies.
No apology necessary. Thank you, Mayor. As is custom, not that we have any collective bargaining agreements anymore, of course, as we all know, but as is custom, usually our labor relations manager does give a report to us, and I know Greg and Aaron are with us. I don't want to have you go through your detailed written report, but was there any other additional information you wanted to share, Greg and Aaron, before I ask my particular specific question?
I don't have anything to add, Alder Revere.
Okay, thank you. So then my question actually might also as well not only be for labor relations staff, but actually for Justin. And I don't know, Justin, how much you were involved in actually being at the bargaining table, considering your newly minted status as our Metro Transit General Manager. But I wanted to ask any of you, again, Justin, Aaron, Greg, if you could share with us what in this collective bargaining agreement would address the issues that we've been having with overtime spending amongst transit operators in particular. That at this committee, we've talked a lot over the last few years about the financial impact of absentee trends among transit operators. And so I see on page 2 of the Labor Relations Manager's summary that there's some discussion of modifications that might very well get at that issue. And I'd like one or more of you to elaborate on that, please.
Greg or Aaron, that might be a better question for you. I'm not sure I have all the information on that.
Aaron, you specifically worked on this proposal. Do you want to address it? We made a number of changes, but I'll let Aaron go into more of the details on it. But specifically, we shortened the number of occurrences, and we also shortened the discipline schedule itself.
Sure. So before I go into that, I would just mention that I think a lot of the overtime issues we've talked about maybe most appropriately addressed through staffing and efforts that we're making to ensure that we're adequately staffed, as well as to ensure that we create a work environment that employees are able to work in. We've talked about things like bathrooms, things like that, that make it difficult for employees at times to stay at work. But specifically, we were able to come to agreement on some attendance language, and that attendance language really set up incentive for employees to pre-authorize their leave. And that pre-authorization is intended to provide us with better preparedness in terms of establishing schedules and not having to rely on overtime in order to meet staffing needs, but rather to be better prepared for when those needs occur. It does also create quite a bit of administrative efficiency in terms of how employees are using that leave, creates what we think are less issues with turnover in terms of employees getting attendance violations for things like not turning in slips that aren't absolutely necessary for them to take their leave, use their leave, etc. So there are quite a few things that we think the attendance leave helps address on top of the item that Greg mentioned at the start, which had to do with the disciplinary schedule for excessive absenteeism, which was reduced quite a bit. So when I say reduced, it was shortened so that you don't end up having quite as much absenteeism before you might no longer be working there.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So these were, Aaron, these were obviously specific proposals and that management did bring to the bargaining table and were accepted by Local 695.
Yeah, I would say it was the area that took the most work in terms of our discussion across the table because their attendance rules are really complex. But it was something that management brought, and we were able to get agreement on it from Local 695.
Great, I appreciate that. I see. I'm sorry.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
We had just getting rid of the 6 slips. We have a person at Metro that's their job is to review those, and it is a 40-hour-a-week job. And so that'll be that leads to that efficiency we were talking about. We can now assign that person additional work because they won't be looking at 6 slips all the time.
That sounds like a nice improvement. Thank you for adding that, Greg. I see that Wayne also is with us for the meeting. Was there, before I yield, was there anything more that anyone at Metro would like to add to this, Justin or Wayne? And your optimism that the absentee trends will be headed the other direction?
Yeah, I think, Aaron raised some good points that there's a lot of things that we can do and will do outside of the contract to reduce some of our overtime spending. And you'll see, more of that coming from us in terms of right-sizing the amount of service around the number of people we actually have available so that we're not stretching people thin. Bathroom facilities, we're working on improving those as well. And so I think we are working on a lot of that, but the items that Greg and Aaron mentioned around improving some of our absenteeism, or more specifically, improving the notice around absenteeism will really help us structure our workflow so that hopefully we can fill in the gaps with scheduled non-overtime work rather than with overtime work that's kind of done on an ad hoc basis.
Thanks to you all for your very positive updates. I appreciate that, and I'm excited that this agreement that we're about to vote on does have these improvements. Because, as I say, the staff overtime has been a huge issue for us at budget time the last couple of years, and look forward to continuing this conversation then as part of next year's budget process. Thank you all. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Alder. Are there any other questions for staff on this item? Seeing none. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, it's been moved and seconded. Is there any objection to recording unanimous vote in favor? Seeing none, we'll record a unanimous vote in favor of item 2, which will take us to item number 3, Legistar 61377, which is authorizing the issuance of an RFP for professional architect and engineering consultant design services for the existing building in Olin Park located at 330 East Lakeside Street. Alder Carter, a motion?
Move adoption of 61377.
Alder Verveer, a second, and I believe this is your question.
I'll second. And yes, I do have a question or two about this, Mayor.
Go ahead, Alder.
Thank you. So the first question perhaps might be for Brian Cooper or it could be for Eric Knapp. So either of them. My question was, in the body of the resolution, it of course doesn't mention any fiscal impact, but then of course the fiscal note does mention over $500,000 being the potential estimated cost of this. Could one of those gentlemen or anyone elaborate on that estimate, please?
Certainly, and I'm not sure if Brian's on or not, but I'm happy to discuss it. The 505 is actually what's budgeted in parks. The parks budget right now in total. Certainly, actually, we hope this RFP is lower than that. I just read the actual fiscal note specifically. And Brian and the facilities team and my team, Mike Sturm, have been working on estimates, but it's up to that amount. I think it could get close because of the design. What the goal of this RFP is not to reconfigure the building into something new. It's not to make it a new use. It is certainly that we could prepare it for some additional use in the future because it's getting the mechanicals correct. And the phase 1 of actually doing that work is estimated to be in total, including design, between $2 to $3 million in total. So it's a higher design fee percentage than you might normally see if it got to 400 to 500. That's because it's retrofitting old building mechanicals, and those are funds that we have requested in the capital budget, as well as within our SIP limits, as well as anticipating some additional support from a future partner.
Could you elaborate? Thank you, Eric. Could you elaborate further beyond what's in the whereas clauses in the resolution as of today what you think the highest and best use for this building would be? You and I, obviously, as you know, just left a city staff meeting on Zoom moments ago, and I had joked that, we'll talk about your new office, and you would say, "Oh, it's not my new office. It won't be from my new office." But could you, if we can find the money to make all this work in a perfect world, who do you think would be occupying this existing office building in our expanded Olin Park? And instead of asking the follow-up, I'll also ask you as part of the question. Obviously, it's enticing when you drafted the resolution, you state that you think that there would be additional public park and recreation purposes that also could be included here beyond just parks or other agencies' office space. So could you elaborate on, at this early juncture, who you think would occupy the building and what the potential park uses, recreation uses would be beyond staff and counter functions?
Certainly, it's a great question, a really fair question, when we thought about it a lot. So I just want to make sure everybody here understands where we're at. We bought the land and that came with the building. And the land was long marked. We bought it with parkland acquisition funds, which are non-taxpayer dollars. It's a sizable cost, but it's an unbelievable asset to have in public's trust forever. We bought that land, and then we started looking at the building and what it is, and does it have reuse? I can tell you it would be approximately $2 million to demolish the building. Right. So we started coalescing around that figure. That's a big number to take it down. And we started saying, what else could it be? Because the end state of that park in the long-term future, right, of Madison is a parkland addition. We want to see the public use that land and space in a great amount. But we happen to come with a building that could address some other city needs in a real way and shorter term way. And so what our thought process at this point is the RFP that would get a design team in would oversee the development of the mechanicals and ADA issues of the building, even though it's in relatively good repair. Those HVAC and the ADA are not and need to be addressed before there's really any purpose for the building at all. And in doing so, we think having some amount of office space for city parks there from downtown does two things. One, it brings a park space to the south side of civic presence. It also opens up space in the city county building in a way that could be more financially advantageous than some other projects we've been looking at to try to accommodate existing needs in the CCB. And with that, we would look at a partner organization that is very closely aligned with our mission and serving a very similar purpose to us, also has an interest in cohabitating in that building with an office setting and then some amount of public-facing services. And I want to be very cautious about the public-facing services. And then on our side, quote unquote, of the building, we see a long-term reservable spaces in that building. It's a very well-sized building, but there's probably additional investments necessary. And we want to take this first step to prepare for that future state of a more public access, reservable space, and programming type spaces. We want to be intelligent to see that in the future, but we don't want to extend ourselves financially here. We're really trying to keep the financial approach on this with city investment to what it would basically be to demo the building. And then we'd have kind of office space partner there doing some things with the public that I think people would be happy to see. And then with the future phase 2 in the future of kind of building out a reservable space, community room type space for the public as we're able to do so. But a goal for me, this is the finance committee, so a goal for me, as the mayor's heard, is to absolutely keep the capital cost profile at very close to the cost of demo, unlock the potential to save resources downtown at the CCB by having people take some of our offices. And this is not a foregone conclusion that we would all in parks leave the front of the CCB. That's nothing like that's been worked out for certain, but it could certainly alleviate a number of concerns. And frankly, a building that was bought for the purposes of the land underneath it and allow it to solve some problems for us, because it does still have life for it. And I think that's the 10, 20-year vision, Alder Revere. Beyond 20 years, we'll have to see how the building really holds up after 15 to 20.
Thank you, Eric. I see there are other questions in the queue, Mayor, so I'll yield. Thank you.
Thank you, Alder. Alder Harrington McKinney.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And thank you, Alder and Eric, for pulling this off, because I had some questions. And my questions, some of them were answered. And because the public is really looking at how we're spending our money and our budget deficit, these are my questions surrounding the contract, especially since I was on the board to close a library that did not have ADA accessibility. And so, Eric, when you're talking about this property, could you talk about, and I do understand that it's already within the park's budget, but could you say more about one of the timing of this action here, and if there would be any impact and delay. That's my first question. And you mentioned about community access and all of those things. And how is that location? I want to know how you arrived at supporting this through the current budgetary deficits that we are facing now, and what would be the impact if there was no action now? I think that's the summary of my questions.
Certainly, I think the impact of no action is the loss of a potential close community partner with I'll say another public institution. I think I can go that far. We're working on trying to get some general agreement to bring to this body and the council very soon. And they need to move at a time frame that they have security. Without that, I think they would have to look at alternatives. And without that partnership, I think we would have to look really hard about if it's a financial decision, we'd have to look really hard at if the best option isn't to knock the building down. So the $2 million is about what it would take to knock it down and eliminate the building. What we think is between 2 and 3 is what it takes to give it some significant purpose and the ability to save some resources. Like I said, I don't want to speak for, I don't know if Brian is on the call. If he is, he could jump in, or Rob even. There's other projects in the CCB that are budgeted as well to address space need issues. We believe that if the Parks Division can get at least a significant portion of its staff out of the CCB to an already built location that we paid for with non-tax dollars, we could avoid or at least dramatically reduce some of those projects in the CCB office space budget, is my understanding. Facilities, so I'm not going to put dollars on that. I apologize, but that's a part of the financial vision here. Is we have a partner who's willing to pay for some of the capital, pay us some amount of an operating lease to cover operational, and relieve some pressure downtown. In very frank terms, this is monetizing a savings that we're accruing, which is coming through the park impact fee dollars that were used to buy the facility, frankly. It is kind of how it pencils financially. I know it sounds strange, but that's my read of the situation. And I'm very aware of the financial considerations we are under in parks.
And Eric, Brian is here. Brian, do you want to speak to this larger picture?
Yeah, sure. In regards to the connection to the city-county building, I think I'm not sure how much time folks have spent in some of the suites, but there's some ongoing issues related to both improvements related to the systems in some of the suites, and then there's also just space needs for quite a few different groups. So indeed, if you look at the capital improvement plan, there is an effort to do design work at the city-county building, essentially for all agencies on floors 1, 4, and 5, which is where the primary agencies are, with the exception of police on the lowest level. So there will be a plan getting underway soon to start working on that design. And if indeed we could consider the parks area on floor 1 for some use to be determined, I think it could offer some opportunities that we don't currently have in the city-county building, both for improvements to the systems. And when I say systems, I'm talking mechanical, electrical, plumbing type systems that would improve the quality of the interior environment, but also just space needs that many agencies are maxing out the envelope that they have right now. And I guess another thing that, just to digress for a second, is there's not a lot of sort of welcoming meeting space when you directly walk, public meeting space when you walk directly into the CCB, which is something that I think we'd like to take a look at once we get going in that effort. And again, if Parks is to vacate, and I guess that's a to be determined, there could be some opportunities there to improve that area up front to make a better experience for the public and for staff and for elected officials. And then as for the Olin building itself, I think Eric sort of outlined it there, but the primary elements we'd be trying to deal with, again, like Eric said, we're not trying to do a major remodel. We're just trying to stabilize the building so that it is properly set up for non-emergency repairs going forward. So we'd be primarily addressing the mechanical, electrical, plumbing, fire protection systems. And then also a major issue there is the suboptimal disability access that currently exists that would need to be improved if we're going to get it to the same level that we expect all of our buildings to be as public facilities.
Thank you, Brian. Alder, does that answer your questions?
That expands my questions. Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Alder. Alder Harrington, Alder Moreland.
Thank you, Mayor. I guess I wanted to piggyback on what Alder Harrington McKinney asked. So if this isn't done in this budget, given the severe deficit the city is under now, I understand that we might lose a partner, but is there a possibility is there a better use for these funds now, maybe in another department? And I don't know whether we can move money. I thought we could move money between departments, but I don't know how flexible that is. But is this something that we feel is truly necessary now, given COVID, protest, everything else that we've had to deal with this year so far?
I guess I'll try to answer as best I can. I think it is staff's, at least Parks Division staff's advice that if we want to adapt and reuse the building, this is the most cost-effective and timely way to do it. It is my belief if we don't address those mechanicals, the emergency repairs are going to come due, and either we'll make them or we won't. And then at some point, we're going to have to address the $2 million issue of tearing it down if we don't. And I certainly, like I said, recognize the timing is suboptimal to the city's financial needs. That's why we made a lot of hard choices in our capital budget submission, even for next year, to really not ask for anything beyond what we were previously set for that purpose. But that's my opinion. It's certainly you all and the council ability to reprioritize those as necessary. But if we don't do it, I think the partnership would fall through, and I think we would be moving closer to a demolition plan than not. I don't want to be doomsday, but Brian or someone else could talk about the dire needs of the mechanicals where they're at right now.
I understand that, and you know, I guess I'm supportive of the project as a whole, but these seem to be really unprecedented times, and money is, I mean, it's just not growing on the trees fast enough. And you know, when we look at the budget in totality, are we leaving out areas that would directly impact people more so than a building? And I know the building will impact, you know, how people interact, you know, in the park and things like that. But I mean, are we sure that we won't further into the year have to make very tough decisions, cutting community services, cutting other things, that if we were to, I don't know, go to the partner and kind of explain this is what's going on, and as a city, you know, we're trying to really prioritize given everything that's going on. Can you give us some additional time to work through this for us to get back on some good footing? I guess that's my only concern. I don't want to be in a position where people suffer and we save a building.
Alder, maybe one question to add in there for Eric is, or for finance staff, this is a capital request, correct?
Okay.
Is that right,
correct.
Eric?
Yeah, this is a capital request, and the funding is blended with, even when I talked about, a $2 to $3 million city commitment, is blended between taxpayer dollars and impact fee dollars as well.
Okay.
I'll blend off the top of my head in the future. The 505 is about 50-50, I believe.
Okay. So the capital is basically covering stuff, if you will. Okay. Okay. Thank you, Eric.
Mayor, I have a question.
Alder Carter, go ahead.
Thank you. Eric or David, can you answer this quick question? Can we use park impact fees for transfer that to other agencies?
No.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alder. Are there other questions for staff on this item? Right. Seeing none, it's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Is there any objection to recording unanimous vote in favor of the item? Seeing none, we'll record a unanimous vote in favor of item number 3 and move on to item number 4, which is Legistar 61119, authorizing the city to participate in negotiations with Dane County regarding the county's Rotefeld landfill vertical expansion and creating a city negotiating team committee. And so let's start. Alder Carter with a motion.
I move adoption of 61119.
Alder Verveer, second.
Second.
Thank you, Alder Verveer. Thank you, Alder Carter. Alder Moreland, I believe this was your question.
Yes, ma'am. So I guess a quick question. So there's a whereas in here that if we do not enact a sitting resolution within 60 days of receiving the request, then the city may not participate in any negotiations with Dane County regarding the expansion of operations. What are the main implications of that if we don't do it? What are we going to lose?
Looking for what staff might answer your question, Alder.
Mayor, I know Rob Phillips was unable to join us this evening, and I know Doran Visti in the city attorney's office has been working on it, so maybe Attorney Haas is the correct person.
Thank you, Laura. Attorney Haas?
Yeah, so my understanding of this is that what would be lost is the city's opportunity to participate in the negotiations, not only for this particular round, but in the future, if the county is looking to site a new landfill or expansion. So we'd be missing out on the opportunity to participate in those discussions.
Okay, but what does our participating in the discussions do for us?
Well, I think typically we look at the city wanting to have input into how that landfill is developed, expanded, or not expanded. So this gives the city the opportunity to do that. I don't know specifically, what issues are on the list that they will be discussing. But if this is not approved, then the city misses out on that opportunity altogether to be at the table.
Alder, I think just from the conversations that I've heard with other staff, there are potential land use implications in surrounding areas, and so there are planning implications that we have adopted neighborhood plans nearby. We have at least one transportation project pending, other land use proposals nearby. So I think that what I've heard staff say in the previous meetings about this issue is that there's a desire to be a part of the conversation so that we can keep an eye on what the longer term implications would be from a land use perspective.
Okay, thank you. That's all I had.
Thank you, Alder. Are there any other questions on this item? All right, is there any discussion? Seeing none, is there any objection to recording unanimous vote in favor of this item? Seeing none, we'll record a unanimous vote in favor of item number 4. And we'll move on to item number 14, which is Legistar 61292, authorizing the Community Development Division to distribute 2020 EOP funds in 3 equal sums to the African Center for Community Development, Freedom Inc., and UNIDOS Against Domestic Violence to assist immigrant communities in dealing with the impacts of COVID-19. Alder Carter, a motion?
I move approval of 61292, number 14.
Thank you, Alder Revere.
Second.
Thank you, Alder Revere. And Alder Harrington McKinney. You have questions about this item?
Yes, I did. And my question is, what was the process of ultimately, so what was the selection process ultimately to arrive at who is going to receive this additional, I think, $150,000? If someone could speak to what that process was and what that process was. Let me just put it there. And that might get to my question.
Thank you, Alder. I think Mr. O'Keefe will speak to that.
Alder, there wasn't a formal process to select these 3 organizations. We've been hearing over the course of recent months about the challenges that have been facing members of the immigrant community in Madison and accessing many of the resources, especially federal resources that are available to help with the impacts of the COVID pandemic. And I think the Latino Consortium has been probably the most organized and most vocal and visible. They'd certainly been raising the issue to us about unmet needs in that community. So as we turned toward redeploying EOP funds to address the needs of immigrant populations in Madison, we were mindful of the fact that there were other communities that the Latino Consortium did not serve. We were hearing quite a bit as well from the African Center for Community Development. We were hearing directly from that organization. We were hearing from the mayor's office, who was hearing from members of that community and that organization, as well as Alder Balde. So when we took the discussion to the Community Services Committee on June the 24th, I think it was the interest of the members of that committee that we identify organizations that we're in regular contact with or that worked with immigrant populations in the city. Freedom Inc., which, as you know, is an organization that's well connected to the Hmong community, was mentioned at that time. And so knowing that we had but $150,000 at our disposal, I think we settled in on dividing it 3 ways among those 3 organizations in the interest of trying to reach a good portion of Madison's immigrant population. So that really was the extent of the process. There was no RFP process like we typically conduct. But we gathered input from community members. We discussed it with the Community Services Committee and arrived at this recommendation.
So I'm going to make a statement that I probably will be splashed back at. That is exactly why when there is a subjective decision like that with no process in place, there always arises the question of how was that organizations selected as opposed to the other organizations selected. And I put this back as a process question, and every time I put it out, it is misconstrued in terms of my intent or lack of support. But as a city going forward, we really need to be specific in terms of how we arrived at the decisions that we make. And to be able to stand and substantiate that is that when there's no process, it's that, well, this was presented or this organization was presented and we just decided. And so I go back to a question that I always have is that there needs to be a process by which we can go back to in order to substantiate these are the community conversations or voices that we had. Based upon that, this is how we arrived at our decision. And when you started off, Tim, you said is that there was no process in place and there was judgment. And so I need to add that voice because as our budget constraints become more critical and as the community gets more judgmental as to how we're spending and allocating and improving our money, we owe it to the community to be able to say with a surety, this is how we made those decisions. And more, the community is challenging how we make our decisions and what departments are funded and what organizations are funded and not funded. And I just want to make that statement. And however it is construed, we really do need to begin to look at how we make our decisions. And the response is that there is no process in place, leaves a gap of understanding for me. And so that's my input and comment.
Alder Harrington, I think I said that there was no formal process. I think you know as well as anybody that under normal circumstances, few agencies in city government know process the way the Community Development Division knows process. I think these are unique circumstances. There's some urgency in trying to deploy these funds. So we did take input from community sources. We did discuss this decision with members of the Community Services Committee. You're right, it doesn't meet the standard of process that we're typically accustomed to, but again, under these circumstances, we think it's a sound recommendation.
Alder Harrington, do you have further questions?
No, I won't expand it. No.
Thank you. Alder Carter?
Yes. Jim, did you say that two of the organizations directly contacted you? Did I hear that right?
Well, we've been hearing from organizations really throughout the spring and summer about different needs within the community. But yes, we have heard specifically not with respect to EOP funds, but generally articulating the needs and the special challenges that have confronted immigrant populations in Madison. We have heard from the Latino Consortium, and we had heard on numerous occasions from the African Center for Community Development. So I think that's what I said, Alder Carter.
My second question is, what are the, are they going to be reporting back on a quarterly basis? How was that set up? I don't see that in here. Are they going to be? Go ahead.
So we will amend these contracts. We currently have contracts with each of the organizations. So in the interest of facilitating the flow of funds and putting them to use as quickly as possible, we will amend those contracts. And we'll certainly expect each of the organizations to provide information about the number of households served and the nature of the of the support that the funds are used to help with.
And are these funds to be used before the end of the year? Or do they have would it be until next year?
No,
a year from when they receive them, I should say.
No, these are 2020 budgeted funds, and so they would need to be used by the end of this year.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Alder Kemble.
Yeah, thanks, Jim, and thanks for answering those questions. I have no problem voting for this item. We as a council authorized you back in April to take the EOF funds and allocate them in a way that was responsive to needs in the community that were not being met by other federal, state, county, or city programs. And, you know, we have hundreds and hundreds of workers who were laid off, who were not eligible for unemployment for one reason or another, or for any other federal program. So this to me is a really small amount of money, given what immigrant families are experiencing in the community, and I'm really happy to support this.
Thank you, Alder. Is there any other questions or discussion on this item? Alder Moreland.
Just really quickly, I will also support this because I think that what Alder Kimball said is absolutely correct. But I do also have to echo Alder Harrington McKinney's concern, because we don't want to make it seem as if we're picking and choosing, and I don't want to say haphazardly, since it did go through community services. There was a set of eyes on it, but we want to make sure that we're being equitable to all organizations and at least giving them the opportunity to request the funds. But I will be supporting. Thank you.
Thank you, Alder. Any further discussion on this item? Alder Harrington McKinney.
No, I'm just waiting for the vote.
Would you like to request a roll call?
No.
Okay. I don't see any further discussion. So is there any objection to recording unanimous vote in favor on this item? Alder Harrington McKinney?
I'm going to abstain.
Thank you, Alder. We'll note you as abstaining. Is there any other objection to recording a unanimous vote except for Alder Harrington McKinney? Seeing none, we'll record a unanimous vote in favor and note Alder Harrington McKinney as abstaining from that vote on item number 14. So that will bring us to item number 17, which is Legistar 60995, substitute creating sections of the MGO to establish a downtown recovery program ordinance. We have a number of registrants on this item, some of whom wish to speak, starting with Jenny Gow of Dayton Street in opposition wishing to speak, to be followed by Christopher Patterson.
Jenny, you should be unmuted.
Okay. Right, am I up?
You are.
Okay, cool. Hi, I'm Jenny Gow. I'm here in opposition to 60995, which outlines the use of public tax dollars for repairs on commercial structures housing State Street businesses. 60995 accompanies 61060. During the pandemic, small businesses have been able to apply for various business grants and loans, such as SBA, EIDL, PPP. We're all in this together. The Ethnic Minorities Grant and Dane Buy Local. While these grants help small businesses hobble along, the reality is that none of this money gets to the heart of the issue. For the most part, business grants and loans like PPP only help to subsidize business owners' rent or offset costs so business owners can pay their rent. Rent is one of the highest costs for most businesses, yet very few property owners have offered rent abatement or forgiveness during the pandemic. Rent on State Street and in downtown Madison is exorbitantly high, and private property owners continue to profit even when their tenants are incapacitated. Whereas loans like PPP direct public tax dollars towards rental costs, the Downtown Recovery Program now seeks to further help private property owners by allocating public tax dollars to those properties. This is happening simultaneously with an affordable housing crisis and the crisis of gentrification in our city. We cannot continue allocating money to the benefit of private property over people. It is also insidious that 60995 describes the use of $500,000 for the Downtown Recovery Program when its accompanying document 61060 now only describes where $250,000 of that money is going to come from. 61060 makes it sound as if the $500,000 will be split between two programs, Downtown Recovery and Downtown Equity. But that isn't true if 60995 didn't also get updated. The implied intent here is that the Downtown Recovery Program will still receive $500,000 total, and that the city will now need to create another resolution in addition to 61060 that takes another $250,000 away from other public services for private property's benefit. Between Downtown Recovery and Downtown Equity, we are now talking about $750,000 being taken away from public infrastructure specifically to benefit private property downtown. If we actually want to help businesses, then we need to ask why so many of them are compelled to stay open during a global pandemic when we have yet to flatten the curve. We need to ask what measures should we be taking so that businesses can fully shut down and people can stay safe. Is our answer to this problem really to continue subsidizing private property's profits? Instead, we need to be looking at examples of other governmental bodies that centered the needs of people during the pandemic. We need to look at examples of cities that gave money directly to people and proposals for rent forgiveness. We need to look at successful measures of implementing rent control and regulation on real estate. In conclusion, I am opposed to 60995, and increasing regulation of the funds in this article will not diminish my opposition. The solution is to maintain public tax dollars for public benefit. I yield my time. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Christopher Patterson of Dayton Street in opposition wishing to speak, to be followed by Kalia Saplin.
Outstanding. So just to confirm, I am unmuted. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Christopher S. Patterson, and I am representing myself in opposition of item 60995. I'm here to explain why I believe that the City of Madison should not consider allocating funds to State Street businesses. Let me begin by stating plainly that repairing the windows and walls of State Street will do nothing to correct the social injustices which led to the damages in the first place. Private insurance is the tool which is to be used to correct damages to private property, not public funds. To clarify my point, it is not the role of the city to cherry pick and support private enterprises over public good. Easing the suffering of a few identifiable private enterprises rather than making a full force effort to minimize the broader suffering of the populace during a global health pandemic indicates a questionable lack of priority for the city. There are worthy projects that the city could choose to fund rather than choosing to prop up a few private enterprise and private property owners. Specifically, redirecting funds to social systems and public health efforts would lessen the suffering in Madison and help us better survive the COVID-19 pandemic. A few potential uses for funds, in no particular order, could be legal representation for the disenfranchised, combating voter suppression, affordable housing, homeless support, drug rehab, mental health services, food banks, unemployment benefits for those affected by COVID-19. In closing, State Street is not the Madison economy. Giving any additional funds to State Street rather than towards social programs to help those most in need is at best a reflection of ignorance and naivety towards human suffering, and at worst a blatant admission of complacency with the status quo in which privilege begets privilege. My name is Christopher S. Patterson, and I am representing myself in opposition of item 60995. Thank you. I yield my time.
Thank you. Next is Kalia Saplin of Fish Hatchery Road in opposition wishing to speak, to be followed by Tiffany Kenny.
Hi, can you all hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. My name is Kalia and I'm a resident of Bay Creek neighborhood. I'm here to ask that you oppose item 17, and here are the following reasons. I am not opposed to supporting small business owners on State Street, particularly during this pandemic. But I am opposed to investments into the recovery of State Street when our lower income neighborhoods and our predominantly Black and brown neighborhoods continue to be overlooked. I am opposed to investments into the recovery of State Street when a large part of the money that would fund this recovery is being stolen from other Madison neighborhoods, such as the neighborhood library LED upgrade and a lot of the programs and projects on the Horizon Planning list, including renovating a fire station on the south side and the north side, the construction of the Rendall library on the east side, the electrification of Metro Fleet buses, and the expansion of Hill Creek Park on the west side. I am opposed to funding the recovery of the State Street with the money for other neighborhood projects when so many of these departments will also be facing a 5% in the year 2021. I am opposed to investments into the recovery of State Street when local tax dollars are being used to fund the recovery of private property. I am opposed to the funding of or the recovery of State Street when with the money for other neighborhood projects when the Madison Police Department has the largest budget of any city agency. I'm opposed to investments into the recovery of State Street when they will most likely be benefiting landlords rather than business owners. I'm opposed to investments into the recovery of State Street under the guise of racial equity. The argument that 70% of businesses are locally owned and operated and 62% of businesses are owned by women and people of color is not enough to make this an equitable move. There's not enough information there to understand the full impact of this recovery fund. I'm opposed to investments into the recovery of State Street under the hurried and last-minute nod to equity through the creation of the Downtown Equity Program. Although I love some of the ideas within that program, this still doesn't address that all of the money and all of the businesses are going to District 4 as opposed to other districts within Madison. And that's the kind of equity that your community would like to see. I'm opposed to these investments because they are inequitable and unjust, because they are being voted on with very little feedback from community members since we were just notified that this entire meeting was happening this morning, and because I see no concerted effort made to measure the impact of this recovery fund on the entire city of Madison, which is some of those are within Madison's racial equity and social justice that was passed 2013 under the priority area equity in city policies and budgets. You have listed to study disparities to evaluate city purchasing and contracting, get increased community voice, and I don't see any of those things happening. So I really hope that you consider those issues here tonight as you discuss this. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Tiffany Kenny of West Washington Ave in support wishing to speak, representing Madison Central Business Improvement District, to be followed by Missian Taylor.
Hello?
Yes, go ahead.
All right, thank you. So good evening. My name is Tiffany Kenny. I am the Executive Director for Madison's Central Business Improvement District. The Business Improvement District is the heart of the city. It is a small geography, and it's a very diverse geography. There are small businesses, there are large businesses, there are big property owners, and there are small property owners. There are, to be specific, 237 properties that make up the Business Improvement District. 61% of property owners own one building. So these are small property owners. And I often think that things get confused, the Capitol Square and State Street. State Street is a very different place than the Capitol Square. In the Business Improvement District, there are 390 businesses, but 152 of those businesses reside on State Street. 38% are bars, restaurants, and cafes. 25% are service industry places, religious centers, nail salons, hair salons. 35% are retail, just to keep us in percentages. And it's important that we think about that makeup and that mix. It has changed over time. As many of you know, we've thought a lot about what retail should be for our community and what could we do to make it better. The city and the Business Improvement District in 2016 and 17 did a lot of research into that topic. And we were hopeful that as we began to implement those, we would see some of the changes that we know our community wants to see in downtown Madison. Those businesses downtown, 74% of them are locally owned. There are some nonprofits. We've got a few chains. We have a national chain, about 10% of them are. But, to the point some earlier speakers were making, 73% of them are minority-owned or women-owned businesses. 15 were brand new, and 55 are family-owned businesses. And the heartbeat of the city is just not really beating well, and we know that. We know there's a lot of work to do. We appreciate the thoughts of the now and the future. And so we, there were businesses that donated money, that protested and are visibly supportive of Black Lives Matters, and they have been destroyed too. And it's a dire situation for our downtown, and we need your help. And we need your help not just for these businesses, but for our whole community, because this is a citywide concern, because this is the city center. We may lose significant tax revenue that supports health and human services. We may not be able to retain and attract talent to our community. People come to Madison for the quality of life that we've had in our downtown and as a community as a whole. And we may lose visitors and all the revenue that they bring that support our small businesses. So in conclusion, we need a public and private partnership to build a downtown that is inclusive, and it's an economic engine, and it's something that we all want and need. There's going to take a lot of money to put it back together, but it's actually going to take a lot of work. And I think that this small amount of money, and size is relative in all of this. I remind you, 61% of the businesses, the property owners own one little building. So this would be a sign of your commitment to downtown as a community, that you're here to help rebuild it. This is a small drop in the bucket of the finances we will need to put downtown back together. But again, I also call on you to know that there's a lot of work that we're going to need to do to make it the inclusive, equitable downtown that we all want. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Miss Ann Taylor of Baldwin Street in opposition, wishing to speak.
There's nobody present by that name.
All right. We also had several folks register to speak as available to answer questions. Amy Basil of Richard Street in opposition, Alex Leroy of Allen Boulevard in Middleton in opposition, and Justin Rabensdorf of Fell Road in opposition. Are there questions for any of our registrants? All right, seeing none. We also had a number of other registrants, and I'll ask staff to share that list with the body, please. It's fairly long. All right, so then let's get a motion on the table. Excuse me, Alder Moreland, a question?
I do, for Ms. Kinney, Tiffany.
Go ahead, Alder.
I'm wondering, do we have any type of insight as to how much money these businesses are having to put? Because this is going to be a reimbursement. This is not going to be an outlay prior to anything being done, at least the way I read this. So do we have any idea how much money has already been expended by these businesses to get their businesses back into shape?
Good question. I have a couple of sets of data that could help us know that. I don't have a solid answer to the 152 businesses, what they are at. What I do have is that we spent some time with the Boys and Girls Club. As you know, or maybe you don't know, I'm sorry. The community came forward with a GoFundMe campaign to help our small businesses in the days following the rioting and the looting that happened in downtown Madison. They raised about $200,000, and through a committee, we're allocated that to our small businesses downtown. And so I'm able to see sort of the back end side of that data. First, many of the businesses, the cap that they were able to ask for was $7,500. And so many of them asked for that amount. Many of them asked for, on the flip side, just their insurance deductibles. So it's a really wide range of amounts. But as an example, I have one business who, because of the damages to their exterior, it's a $25,000 cost not covered by their insurance. And the stories are just so unique. But in that case, they were able to receive some of that GoFundMe money to help make a dent in that.
Okay, and addressing what one of the other registrants brought up, that there have been other avenues for these businesses to try to get money. Do we know where they are in the process? I know that the PPP was for covering salaries, I believe. And I know that there's special considerations for different pots of money, but do we know how many have taken advantage of that? Can we get any insight into that?
I know, I wouldn't know all of those numbers. I am fortunate, maybe somebody from the city, we're able to sit on a call weekly where we ask and share some of that information. And so a number I can share with you is that 50 businesses were able to apply for the We Are Together from the WEDC, and that's just $2,500. But those are different subsets. I wouldn't know of the 152 on State Street, which were the 50.
Okay, and then it's my understanding that TR McKenzie said that they would help some of these businesses repair some of the damage. Is this what came from the GoFundMe? Was that to pay TR McKenzie for helping with some of that?
Yeah, he has. Yes, you're right. There has been an outpouring of support from community members. And so, yeah, McKenzie has come forward with some help. What they've really helped us do is, there's a real powerful art project that you're aware of downtown. And so they have helped us both put boards up, take boards down, and safely transport boards to make sure that we can save that art for the future. So at this moment, a lot of the work is glass work, and it's not work that he and his team do.
But they're developers.
Correct.
Okay. It just kind of surprises me because I would think that putting up and taking down boards is not in their wheelhouse either. It's good. We needed the help. They stepped up, but I just thought that they were going to help with some other repairs to individual businesses. But you're saying that that's not the case.
Not at this time.
Okay. And out of the 152 businesses, how many are the big box chains?
Let me hold on one second. 10%. So I guess 15 of those. Okay. I have to pull that actually. I'm sorry. On State Street, there are 8 regional chains and 23 national chains. So a regional chain is like Ian's Pizza because he's got more than one location. And then 23 national chains. Although at this point, I know a few are closing and not coming back. So.
Okay. And I guess this will be a question for the staff, but I'm just going to throw it out there so when we get to that time, they have it. It's my understanding that neither of the 8 regionals or 23 nationals would be included in this program. So I'll just let it be with that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alder. Alder Harrington McKinney, questions for registrants?
I have a question for Tiffany, and I want to just continue with the line of questioning that Alder Moreland. Tiffany, when you talked about State Street, you used percentages, and I hear small businesses. Could you say more about who owns these businesses in terms of, you say small businesses, give us an idea of, I've heard small businesses, I've heard mom and pop, I've heard so many descriptions of what we're looking at. And so could you say a little bit more so that we can have a picture of who was impacted greatly with the State Street rebuild?
Absolutely. Thank you for asking, Alder McKinney. So there are, just as, again, to get a little more specific in numbers, there's 152 businesses on State Street, 107 are locally owned, 14 are nonprofits, 8 are regional chains, and 23 are regular chain, or what you would consider a chain store. And so if we want to really talk about the locally owned and operated, it is I am so fortunate to get to work for a really unique group of people. I asked them a lot of questions in the last, 60 days, a lot more than I've ever asked them actually in the 4 years that I've worked there. And I asked them a lot of things, who are you? What do you do? What's your story? And, I am just, again, continued to be inspired by the diversity that we have downtown, while acknowledging we also do not have many Black business owners. And I think that that's something that we know we want to work on. But as I look at this and I read the response to a question I asked actually over the weekend, I said, will you just tell me your story? Who are you? And I kind of got teary as I put the answers together because it's amazing. I have answers that say, I'm a long State Street business owner. I have people who say, I'm a gay white man. We have an African-American barber on staff who's the busiest on staff. We're celebrating 30 years on State Street. I have no post-secondary education, but I started this business here on State Street and I'm doing well. I'm a white woman and I've owned the salon for 14 years. I'm an Asian male. We're both Albanians. We left Albania after the war in Kosovo to come here. I'm a Korean American. I'm Hungarian. I'm an active member of the LGBTQ community. I'm Taiwanese. I'm Jewish. I'm white, but I was raised by a Black woman who made me the person I am today. I'm Pakistani. I'm Arab American. I'm Nepalian. I don't think I spelled that right. I apologize. I'm veteran. I'm a UW graduate. I'm a Madisonian.
Thank you, Tiffany.
Thank you, Alder. Alder Moreland, another question?
Yes, for Tiffany as well. Just a couple of more. So, Tiffany, you mentioned the African American barber. Does he own that business?
I looked into that. It looks like he owns a chair. You know how you rent your chair at the salon? Right. So no, and I think, one of the things that I, in my role as, I used to do just for the Business Improvement District, we marketed and promoted downtown. And what we realized is there's a lot of things that are missing from downtown. And so, I'm moving forward in relationships to work on that, because Alder Moreland, I think that that's a problem, that there is not a Black-owned business owner on State Street.
Okay, and I don't want to put you or anyone else on the defense, but has there been, prior to everything that's happened in our community recently, what type of good faith efforts have taken place to try to bring more African Americans to downtown as in a business relationship?
No, I think that that's I would actually say that that's a fair critique. I think there hasn't been a focused effort on any of that. I think we've let our downtown just happen a little bit. And I think so to your question, to the bid's role in that, there hadn't been a role for the bid before they thought, I'll underline that, because I'll tell you now that our executive committee, and you're right now, I think I hear you say the word now, understands that was more of a problem than they understood.
Okay. And I'm not sure whether you'd be able to answer this question or not, but do you know how many of the business owners actually own buildings?
No, I don't think I would have that data set right in front of me. No.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Alder.
Mayor, I have a question.
Go ahead, Alder Carter.
Yeah. So, Tiffany, you might know this, you might not, but in the world of hair, both hair stylists and barbers, isn't it common that they rent their chair and therefore they're in their own business?
Yes, correct.
If they whack your hair the wrong way, they won't get you back. I think I can say that honestly.
Correct. You are correct.
So I just wanted to, and did you say he had been down there how long?
Let me find that one for us.
And while you're looking for that, when you were talking about the 8 regional businesses like Ian Pizza, those are locally owned, correct?
The ones that we call regional chains, yes, those would be locally owned things where there's like a 2 or 3. Maybe they have a Minnesota home base. And then back to your original question, it says that the person filling out the survey had owned the salon for 14 years. It doesn't specify how long the African American owned their chair.
And when you say Minnesota, that's just another suburb of Wisconsin.
Okay. Sure.
And for the 14 nonprofits, can you tell me what areas they're in? Like, do they provide a service? Is it client base or?
I think it's a little bit of both. On the Capitol Square, we have a little bit more service based, but like Canopy Dance would fall as a nonprofit on State Street.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alder. Are there other questions for any of our registrants? All right. Seeing none, then Alder Carter, a motion?
Yes, I approve approval of 61060, number 18. Adoption.
I believe we're still on 17, Alder.
Oh, I'm sorry. I move adoption of 60995, number 17.
Alder Vivier?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Are there, let me suggest that we hear from staff. I think that things have changed fairly rapidly on this front. And there may be some confusion about exactly what's before us. So let's have staff just walk us through with both, I guess, the entire cluster of items here. Matt, if you could just walk us through what we're considering tonight.
Sure. Good evening, everyone. What's before you currently is item number 17, which is Legistar 60995. And this is the ordinance that would set up the downtown recovery program. And I'll just briefly touch on the highlights of the program. Applicants could be either a business owner or property owner in the downtown. As was alluded to by one of the questions that was asked, the business or building owner needs to have at least half of the owners residing within Dane County, or have a business where at least 50% of the key managers are living in Dane County, and those managers have a lot of independence and autonomy in the management of the business. Or finally, that the business is headquartered and registered in Dane County. So yes, the intent is to have the funding be provided to those building owners and business owners that are local. Two new items that were added in recent days were that if the applicant is a property owner, if they're, in other words, a building owner, that the value of their property cannot exceed $750,000. And roughly speaking, that probably only limits the use of the funds by property owners to somewhere between a quarter and a third of the buildings downtown at most. And finally, priority will be given to applicants who are individuals of color, immigrants, women, disabled veterans, and other underrepresented groups. Eligible expenses for these funds are really limited to just repair. So repair and replacement of damaged windows and doors and other exterior facade items, and related cleaning and repair to interior space. And as mentioned before, it's a reimbursement program. So we want to see some evidence that repairs were made. And again, the focus of the program is solely on repairing things that were broken, not on sort of new initiatives and not on any operating costs associated with the business. Again, it's a grant program up to $25,000 to cover the lesser of the cost to make the repair or the cost of the insurance premium. And as noted later in the ordinance, the program would be administered by DPCED. So this is the first of two related items before you this evening. The ordinance simply outlines the use of the funding for the downtown recovery program. The companion resolution 61060 provides the budget authorization for the program. And as noted in that substitute resolution, $250,000 would be provided for this downtown recovery program. $250,000 would be provided for proposed downtown equity program. And yes, that is a change that was made. It is now only $250,000 for the downtown recovery program. And you'll note that in both the updated fiscal for the ordinance and in the companion funding resolution. And the source of the funds for these efforts are projects that the finance department has determined are either not going to occur this year or that are going to be coming in under budget. As you all know, every year as a city, we budget items within the capital budget that then for whatever reason don't move forward or don't end up costing as much. And so we worked with the finance department to identify some sources of funding that fall into that category. The funding resolution, 61060, outlines, basically references this downtown recovery program ordinance as the ordinance that would cover that $250,000. For the downtown equity program, the resolution itself doesn't approve any specific elements of that program. It only authorizes the funding. And you'll note at the very end of that resolution that it directs staff to prepare future ordinances and resolutions for the sub-programs that may make up that equity program to come back to the council at a future date. And some of the initial ideas that we've had for the downtown equity program include a downtown ready program patterned off of the very successful market ready program, providing support for some pop-up retail opportunities, providing support for what we're calling a destination store, which is a more long-term pop-up retail opportunity, and enhancing the online platform of some of our existing and potential businesses downtown. We also note at the end, though, that there might be similar efforts that we identify as we start having further outreach with especially our Black business community and other community-wide business organizations. It's no surprise, I think, to anyone that work on this resolution has occurred over a relatively short period of time. And we recognize that there needs to be a lot more work done on the equity program in terms of really defining the specifics about how we're going to utilize those funds. So again, as a result, the funding resolution only authorizes the availability of those funds in 2020. We would need to do some additional work and come back to you at a later date for a more refined proposal on specifically how those funds would be used.
Thank you, Matt. Alder Verveer, do you have questions? Oh, sorry. Alder Verveer?
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to say at this point that there was a registrant that I'm aware of that wanted to speak on this item that I think you're aware of now as well.
Thank you, Alder. I don't see any additional registrants on item 17. If, with the will of the body, if somebody did register for, excuse me, I do now see additional registrants on item 17. Is there any objection to hearing from an additional registrant on item number 17 from the body? Seeing no objection, Jason Ilstrup of West Washington Ave in support, wishing to speak, representing Downtown Madison Incorporated.
Good evening, Alders. Good evening, Mayor. Thank you very much for allowing me to come in both on this item and on file number 18 as well. Hope you're all doing well and staying healthy. My name is Jason Ilstrup and I'm the president of Downtown Madison Inc. And today I speak on behalf of the organization in favor of both file numbers 61060 and 60995. Right now, downtown Madison is suffering. Our community is suffering. Our city is suffering. Over the last 4 months, COVID-19 has devastated the economic heart of our community downtown. Locally owned businesses downtown are struggling to cope with all of the economic hardship from the pandemic. Many businesses have closed permanently, as Tiffany mentioned, and many others are barely surviving. At the same time, systematic racism, ever present in our community and nation for over 400 years, created a downtown where not everyone in our community is welcome, a downtown where no Black-owned businesses on State Street currently exist, a downtown that never reached its full economic and cultural potential because too many in our community were denied access. As social commentator Heather McGee concludes, racism has a cost for everybody. The overlapping catastrophes of COVID-19 and racism, which are gripping our community, have created untold suffering on so many. Yet, these catastrophes present a unique moment in our history where we have the opportunity for real change in our community and in our own downtown. This grim situation, often of our own making, creates a time when we can reimagine downtown and correct the errors of the past. We can create a center city where everyone feels welcome, where the economy thrives for all, and where cultural flourishes in all of its forms. The Downtown Recovery Act and the Downtown Equity Program help cast a new vision for the city. The Recovery Act works to ensure many of our local businesses have the financial assistance to remain open during these difficult times, holding on while we all work to build a better downtown. This investment in downtown helps businesses and people survive, all while assisting downtown to remain the economic engine of our entire region. The Equity Program works to ensure our downtown businesses makeup is more diverse, inclusive, and equitable. The investment in new diverse businesses helps us invest in the most important asset in our community, our people, who will then help create a downtown where more of us will feel welcome and more in our community can thrive. These programs, side by side, go a long way in making sure this unique moment in time ends in hope and not in suffering. I urge you to support both 60995 and 61060 tonight. Support the Downtown Recovery Act and the Downtown Equity Program. Thank you very much for your time, and thank you for adding me in last minute.
Thank you. Are there questions for Mr. Ilstrup? All right, seeing none, we'll go back to questions.
Mayor, it looks like Alder Moreland has her hand up.
Alder Moreland, did you have a question for Mr. Ilstrup?
No.
Okay. But question for staff?
Correct.
Yes. All right. Go ahead, Alder.
So my question is, I'd like the concept in 61060, and I know that we're not quite on that, but it's kind of a bundle. But what would you say is the cost of setting up a new business on State Street as opposed to repairing an existing one?
Oh, I'm sorry. I have to unmute you, Matt. There you go.
Thank you, Alder. I mean, it is certainly more costly to start a new business than to repair an existing business. I think that this program would provide up to $25,000 per either business owner or property owner. We've in the past working through city programs, the cost to sort of build out a space to a new business's needs can certainly very quickly exceed $25,000. A lot depends on the business. Certainly, restaurants or cafes are going to have a much more expensive cost of getting started rather than many retailers. But generally speaking, starting a new business would be more costly than the repairs to an existing one.
Okay, so realistically speaking, the $250,000 really wouldn't go as far as the $25,000 to owners who already have an established business and that have already had the opportunity to acquire monies from other funding sources.
Well, I think the important thing to note is that the monies that business owners have received from other funding sources, such as PPP and the state programs, really only go to address their payroll and operating cost concerns and challenges that they're facing, which is different from this program. This program is strictly targeted towards making physical repairs to the physical spaces that were damaged. And I think that our businesses downtown are really facing two distinct sets of financial challenges. One is the operating, which businesses throughout our entire community are facing. And then the second is the repair work that's needed as a result from some of the looting that occurred. And that the other programs that are out there have not provided funding that can help in that regard.
So in the time that this, well, let me go back. So this is an ordinance which will be codified, and something would have to happen in order for this to come out of the ordinance code, correct?
Well, right now, the reason that this is an ordinance is that under new federal accounting standards for government, we have to have programs like this set up via ordinance. Right now, the funding authorization in the companion resolution only authorizes funding through the end of the year, through December 31st. So what would likely happen is that eventually, whether it's sometime in 2021 or later, as part of a cleanup of MGO, which occasionally happens, is the ordinance would eventually just be repealed. because it no longer would have any effect because it is only meant for a short-term response to what we're facing this year.
Okay, just so that I'm clear. So 60995, creating the ordinance, this has to be, people have to request the reimbursement prior to the end of this year, or they're no longer eligible.
Yes.
So what about the funds being provided in 61060?
Well, so the 61060 funds, the ones that we are then using for the equity program, so the second program, there's a couple of different scenarios of what could happen to that funding at the end of the year. One is we might be encumbered under some contracts with service providers to provide the support to some of the initiatives that we have. If that's the case, then the funding automatically continues to the next year. Otherwise, if there's a desire on the part of the mayor and the council to continue the downtown equity program into 2021, the remaining funding could be reauthorized or new funding could be added per the direction of the mayor and the council.
And it also could not be reauthorized, correct?
Correct. We could make the decision that we no longer wish to proceed with that work and conclude it.
Okay, just one last question. So in the time that you guys have had since this was introduced, have you gotten any additional information from State Street businesses as to what they might be needing as far as assistance?
Yes, we have had some conversations, and as Tiffany Kinney mentioned on the call earlier today, the program that was funded through the GoFundMe campaign led by the Boys and Girls Club, they have provided almost $200,000 to businesses within the downtown. In some cases, some businesses have likely received all of the funding that they would need. And I should mention too that we will work with the bid to determine that if a business has already received reimbursement for some of the work that they did through the GoFundMe campaign, that we would then not provide funding through this. So in some situations, some businesses or property owners have received a reimbursement and they're fine. Some businesses and property owners had a relatively modest insurance deductible that they've paid and they're fine. Other businesses received a partial reimbursement from that GoFundMe campaign, but they likely still have funding that they could get reimbursed for because their costs were above and beyond the $7,500 from that GoFundMe campaign. There are also other businesses that we understand are still working through with their insurance companies, whether or not their insurance company will pay for some of this cost. Different insurance companies, it's our understanding, have different definitions of what's considered looting or rioting type of behavior. And so some of the business owners don't really know yet how much they will need to pay out of their pocket or if their insurance company would in fact pay. So in those cases, those businesses maybe weren't able to take advantage of the GoFundMe campaign and in turn would be looking towards this program.
So is it possible before this goes before the council that we can get a listing of those businesses and where each of them are in this process? We don't have to know their name, but, business, A through whatever, so that we kind of have a better idea of how many we're talking about. Because it makes me feel uncomfortable to say, yes, we'll allocate this $250,000. A business can get $25,000, but what's to say that a business owner and a property owner, a business owner who applies for his $25,000 and a tenant who applies for their $25,000, that we're not double dipping here?
Yep. Well, we'll work with the business improvement districts to compare notes as to who's applying for this program and who already received funds through the GoFundMe campaign. We'll probably have, in fact, within our application form, a question that basically asks that: did you receive an allocation of funding from the bid through that program. But we'll also certainly double check, on our own. In terms of a detailed list of what costs every business owner is currently facing, I'm
not necessarily that. Just a spreadsheet saying, not the totality of their costs, but some of them you said they're fine. Some of them only have the insurance deductible. If we know this already, why can't we report on that? That 50 businesses are good. It's the other however many businesses we're looking at.
I can certainly work with Tiffany at the bid to see if they have any data that can be pulled out of the applications that were received for the GoFundMe campaign. I'm not sure exactly what we'll be able to provide, but I can certainly follow up and see what we can get.
Okay. I just, I don't want it to seem as if I'm not supportive of assisting because they're residents, just like, I'm a resident. But I just think that this is information that we can clearly have data on without just blanketly saying this. There's information that has already been collected somewhere. And I think, it would be foolish of us to approve this when there's information that's there that we have not had an opportunity to review.
Yeah, I'm not sure that there's really a central place that all of this information has been recorded. We know people tell us what their individual experiences are. We know from the applications that they received, we have certain data points there. But one data point that we don't have is we don't have a sort of comprehensive breakdown of what every business owner has experienced or what their current status is. So it would be more of an extrapolation from the information that we have received to date.
I kind of see that, but I don't buy it because we're talking a finite number of businesses here, and we can get the information by asking.
Correct. We have not gone door to door and asked every business what their needs are.
Okay. Thank you, Matt.
Yep.
Mayor, can I ask a question?
Yeah, Alder Carter, before you do, I just wanted to pick up on one point that Alder Moreland raised, and I'm not sure that your question got answered, and that was, Matt, the question of could a property owner and a business owner who rents from that property owner both apply for this program?
No. Well, with the caveat that, you could have a situation where you had, let's say, so if you can picture many of the State Street buildings, you have a door that leads to a stair that goes to the apartments above. You could have a situation where the building owner applies because the glass was smashed in on the door going to the apartments, which is the building owner's responsibility. And then a tenant right adjacent to the door had their window smashed, and under their lease, it's their responsibility to fix them. So you could have a situation where you have a building owner applying for one element of a building and a business applying for another element, but not the same element.
Thank you, Matt. Alder Carter?
Yes, Alder Moreland, are you asking for this information for tomorrow night? I just want clarification.
I don't know what tomorrow night is.
Common Council meeting.
Oh, that is tomorrow night. I guess I can't have it by then. I just think that there's information out there to have that we've had time to get that we should have had. I guess that's my point. If we can't have it by tomorrow, I just have to think through my vote. Thank you, Alder Carter.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Alders. I don't see any other questions for staff. Alder Evers, I thought I saw you. Alder Evers?
Thank you, Mayor. This is for Matt. And Matt, I want to say thank you for indulging me in a couple lengthy phone conversations about this topic recently. In one of our conversations, I asked you if you had a broad estimate, not by business, but just a kind of a gross total of what may be needed. And granted, it might be a back of an envelope, but as I recall, you said that the total to cover the damages not covered by insurance and not covered by the previous GoFundMe campaign may in fact be less than $250,000, might be closer to $200,000. Do you recall that?
Oh, I'm sorry. Matt's muted himself again. There you go.
Yes, I mean, when, as individuals likely know, when this resolution was originally introduced, it was at $500,000 for the downtown recovery program. We know that since that time, the bid in partnership with the Boys and Girls Club set up the GoFundMe campaign, which funded about $200,000. So, admittedly, a significant dollar value has already been put forward to the downtown business community to assist with these efforts. So yes, it's very possible that we may only get $200,000. We may even get less, which of a request, which is also one reason why you'll note in the resolution that we have a provision that should there be any remaining funds from the downtown recovery program, that those funds could be made available to the downtown equity program.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alder. Alder Verveer.
Thank you, Mayor. I wanted to suggest that perhaps with the permission of the body, we go back to Tiffany Kenny to answer some of these questions, because she does have some additional hard data that she has not previously shared that could respond to the last few questions from colleagues relating to surveys that she's done relating to the already distributed GoFundMe funds, which I believe totaled $150,000, that sort of information.
Thank you, Alder. Is there any objection from the body to bringing Ms. Kenny back to answer those questions? All right, seeing no objection, can we get Tiffany Kenny back, please?
Hello.
Tiffany, thank you.
Okay. Yep, thank you. I have a couple things I could probably share. Thanks, Alder Verveer. I think maybe I'll just give you some thoughts about the GoFundMe, because I collected some numbers on that. Again, just a reminder, they could request anywhere from $0 to $7,500. That was going to be the capacity for them. And that application deadline was June 23rd. So, about 30 days ago, and just about 30 days after the damages they received. 65 applicants applied. They requested a total of $206,500. Again, knowing that the threshold, there's sort of two notes to that. First, that they couldn't have asked for more than $7,500. And the other would be that most of them just knew their insurance deductibles. And so they would just filled out the form as a request for their insurance deductible. And I can't remember who mentioned, but it has been interesting to learn the different coverages that are available for civil unrest and how sometimes it's covered and sometimes it's not. So we found that to be an interesting challenge. Anyway, so to the numbers then, 59 of those 65 applicants received some funding. The people who didn't receive it, there was a variety of reasons for that, including maybe to one of your comments about a duplicate application. We watched that pretty closely too. 32 businesses requested $2,500 or less. I think those were a lot of the people who knew their insurance deductibles. 9 businesses asked for the $2,500 to $5,000 number. And then 18 businesses requested the higher numbers. And that ended up being about $110,000 for those 18 businesses that we were able to give. And they were, that was only about 60% of their request. So that's the GoFundMe money. And then just a quick overview on some insurance things that I had prior to the GoFundMe. So we've been trying to get the businesses to complete a survey, and Alder Moreland, I wish they would. It's really challenging sometimes. They're just, filling out a piece of paperwork in the middle of everything else. So I do have 122 of them who filled it out. Again, there's 152 on State Street, so I didn't get everybody. There's actually, though, when you add the areas around State Street, so directly kind of off of State Street, there's an additional 40 that we're kind of watching because places like Gilman or Gorham received a little bit of damage. Of those 122 businesses, 90 reported damages. And maybe that's a number that might be helpful for you to understand, because there were 32 who also felt they were impacted, but that may be because they chose to close or board up. So 90 of our businesses downtown reported significant damage to their property. And the lowest deductible I found was $1,000, and I have one business who reported a $50,000 deductible, which is a really high number. I think that might be what I have to share, unless there was a specific question. Those would be some things just to help you understand maybe what we're trying to get our hands around.
Thank you, Tiffany. Alder Verveer, did you have specific questions?
No, thank you.
Thank you, Alder. Alder Moreland?
Just a couple. Thank you, Tiffany, for that. This is very helpful. You noted that of the surveys, only one indicated a $50,000, which is ridiculous, deductible. Do these are these businesses just the ones that we consider local, or at best regional? I mean, did any big box complete this?
No, I don't have. No, they did not. So Under Armour and Urban Outfitters, those businesses are not in this survey.
Okay. So 65 applied for the 75, no, for the 2,500, correct? The GoFundMe is the 2,500, correct?
32 businesses received 2,500 from the GoFundMe. Okay. There were a total of 65 applicants.
Okay, but they could ask for up to 7,500. Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So 41 were less than 5,000 or less.
Yes. Yep. Yeah. And I think that's important to know that we're looking, to the numbers you're thinking about. Yeah, there's about 2/3 who maybe have these smaller issues that maybe we're helping take care of, and we're super supportive that the community had that. But then there is this maybe a third of these businesses that we're talking about who could only ask for 7,500, and their numbers they were asking from, they had repairs that were higher than that.
Have these dollars been allocated yet?
Yes, actually last week, the notices were sent out to all of these businesses. So, if you ever wanted to, if I ever wanted to trade shoes with somebody, I would have traded shoes last Friday, where you got to see all the thank you letters that came in from these small businesses. So last Friday, 1 week ago Friday, they were given their notices.
Is there any way we can get an anonymous listing of what was given per business?
It would be, it's a public piece of information.
Oh, okay.
Sure that.
Yeah, if we could get that. And then of the 122, I guess it's such a disparity between who applied. Well, the other wasn't even an application for anything. This was just a survey of damages, correct? So yeah. 65 of the 121, is it 121? It's 152 total.
Correct. There's 152 businesses total on State Street as of May 31st.
Okay. So, but of the ones that would be eligible for this program, only 65 of those applied for these funds.
Correct. And I think the feedback I got from the businesses that didn't apply, that I reached out to, who I said, why didn't you apply? Mm-hmm. There were a couple different factors. The main one being not really understanding the scope of their damages yet. And so I even encouraged those that I could to say, well, just go ask for your insurance deductible if you know that's it. So there's a big gap in what they knew when it was just 4 weeks out, or actually 3 weeks out for some of them.
So the whole 200,000 of the GoFundMe it's gone.
Correct.
It's okay. Okay. So the people that didn't apply are still perhaps in great need.
Correct. I think, there would be at least about 2/3 of that 122 that are sitting there maybe waiting for need some help.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you, Alder. All right. Are there any other questions for anyone at this point? Okay. Seeing none, we have a motion and a second on item 17. Is there discussion? Alder Verveer.
Thank you, Mayor. And I realize that this is a bit of a convoluted process in that there are companion resolutions and ordinances or sister items, if you will, on our agenda here. And I also realize, of course, that we discussed the original versions of each of these at our last Finance Committee meeting. So I want to try to keep my comments to what has happened really since our last meeting. I really, really appreciate the support of most of my colleagues on this committee for this initiative. Obviously, the mayor and three of my colleagues on this committee who previously voted for the earlier version of this. So thank you very much for that support. In the time since we last voted and discussed this matter, as Matt Miklajewski articulated for us, a lot of thought has gone into this. A lot of discussion has gone into this. The main piece of which is the realization that the first initiative did not respond to the historic times we're in right now, and that we really should have done better, particularly to try to assist entrepreneurs of color, especially Black entrepreneurs. So responding to this historic moment and responding to the very, I think, absolutely correct criticism of the earlier proposal, we tried coming up then with this companion equity proposal. I realize we don't have all the details of that yet, but staff has worked hard to come up with many very exciting, doable ideas for that initiative. Ideas to try to tackle the longstanding economic barriers and systematic racism that entrepreneurs of color have faced for far too long. And the realization that, and I'm very embarrassed when I acknowledge this, but the realization that there are hardly any, except perhaps the one that you heard about earlier tonight, one Black entrepreneur in the greater State Street area. And that's just unacceptable. There's the further realization that people of color, especially African-American members of our community, do not feel comfortable in the State Street area, do not feel that the State Street area is welcoming enough. There's nothing attractive for especially the Black members of our community to go to State Street or the greater downtown area to enjoy. So that's our efforts to deal with these very clear realizations is why we're asking for your support tonight of this equity program to deal with the injustices and oppression that have historically existed and continue to exist today. Many of the ideas in that so-called equity program are ideas that have worked successfully. For example, the Market Ready program that our staff have direct experience doing for entrepreneurs in our community. And I know they're very eager, and besides Matt, there are other staff that have worked on this that are in this meeting that could speak to the specifics of what's envisioned there. And maybe that will wait for the discussion on the next item. And again, it is admittedly awkward that we're not perhaps taking these together as a package. But that's the main change, of course, that's occurred between now and our last meeting, is that realization that the majority of this money really should go toward recognizing that we have to do everything we can to change the makeup of who owns businesses downtown and be as welcoming and helpful as possible to help with that. Let me say that it has been absolutely heartbreaking every day since May 30th, talking to these small business people downtown, trying to help them rebuild their lives, their livelihoods, rebuild the downtown for the better, trying to convince them that it is safe to take the plywood off of their windows, that they will be safe to do so, that the city is supportive of their efforts to reopen. It is just such a tragic reality that those businesses are struggling so much, as if the pandemic wasn't enough through no fault of their own, they have had to deal with this unprecedented violence for the last many weeks, particularly those 4 nights of rioting. In talking to those people, and again, these are small business people. I don't talk to the national chain folks. They don't talk to me. I don't talk to them that are downtown, and they are very, very few and far between, by the way, as you heard tonight as a reminder. So it is unfortunate that there's a perception that this program somehow would be available to them, because the legislation since day one clearly prohibited non-locally owned businesses from partaking in this program if we create it. Additionally, based on feedback I received in our last meeting, specifically from you, Alderperson Moreland, is why we amended the legislation to cap the value of properties that would be eligible for the owner to take advantage of the program. I really wanted the program to include property owners, not because I wanted those property owners that don't need the money to take advantage of this program. I don't want them to take advantage of the program. But the reality is, as Matt already articulated, many of these landlords, I would also call mom and pop. They own one business. It's been in their family for, in some cases, generations. And they not only have damage to the entryways to their apartments above the retail spaces, but they are dealing with an unprecedented number of vacancies. We had an unprecedented number of vacancies before the pandemic. Then the pandemic hit and more vacancies. And now we have more vacancies than I'm sure we will have experienced in the history of the downtown area as a result of the violence. So these landlords, again, I'm talking about smaller mom and pop landlords, are sitting on damages to vacant storefronts and to the entryway to their residential buildings. With all that said, though, I am absolutely open to any amendments, either today or tomorrow night, or in between our 2 meetings during the course of the day tomorrow. I would have absolutely no objection if it's bothersome to any of my colleagues that we are including property owners in this proposal. Because what I'm really trying to get at are not the property owners. It is these small mom and pop retailers that are struggling so much, that don't believe that they're going to be able to stay open, that don't believe that they can reopen. That's who I'm trying to help. Perhaps it's symbolic, but trying to have them realize that City Hall does care about their future and their livelihoods, and acknowledging that it wasn't their fault that they are dealing with the fallout from the violence that has occurred to their businesses. And so I want to say again, if there's a concern that even though we're now capping the value of the property at $750,000 in this substitute ordinance, if there's a concern that we're including property owners, I would have no objection to removing property owners from the proposal. Furthermore, as I've said in direct conversations with several of you, I have absolutely no objection if we struck the word downtown from this proposal. There certainly was civil unrest that existed throughout our community on the nights of May 30th and June 1st and June 2nd. May 31st, June 1st, June 2nd, when you include the early morning hours. As you know, there was looting that occurred outside of the greater downtown area on several of those nights. So if there's a concern that, as someone said earlier in the public testimony, that this is only for District 4, well, first of all, that's not accurate, because as was discussed at our last Finance Committee meeting, we purposely do not define the downtown, because the thought was that it would be the greater downtown, and applications would be accepted from anyone on the isthmus, anyone that perhaps go as far west as Camp Randall Stadium. So the idea of defining the downtown was something that was specifically omitted from this ordinance. But if any of you have concerns, and I know some of you do, that this program and the so-called equity program are only targeted to the greater downtown area, I absolutely would not object to amendment tonight or tomorrow, or in conversations with any of you during the course of the day tomorrow or later tonight, to remove all references to downtown in both this ordinance and the sister resolution that's before us momentarily. Because the reality is, I know that there of course was riot damage beyond the greater downtown, not to the extent that occurred downtown, but there was looting and vandalism, to be sure, outside of the downtown those days, or moreover those nights. So I wanted to articulate that as well, that if any of you have an amendment that you're thinking of, or you're the reason why you wouldn't be supportive of this is because it's focused on the downtown, please don't let that stop you from supporting this. And again, I would be supportive of removing references to the downtown. I honestly would hate to do so as it relates to the next legislative item, the equity program, because it is absolutely clear that the lack of Black entrepreneurs downtown is a very tragic reality. There are entrepreneurs of color, to be sure, downtown, especially Asian Americans and Latinx members of the community. I know because I know many of them personally, and they're really struggling the most. One of the things that I love about working with downtown businesses is that so many of them are recent immigrants to our community. So many of them are attracted to the greater State Street area because despite the high rents and so forth, there is quite a community of immigrants, both again from really from all over the world that are there that I've had the pleasure of coming to know, and so what is lacking though is what we're trying to respond to, especially with the equity program. So there were many myths that are perceptions that I think are incorrect that you heard in the testimony tonight, and that you heard or have read in emails to us over the last week or so. I want to just quickly mention that there was never any intention that this program would have anything to do with surveillance. I don't know where that came from. I know a Facebook group was perpetuating some belief that this had something to do with surveillance. This has absolutely nothing to do with surveillance cameras, or anything of the sort. This program, this ordinance was meant as direct reimbursement for specific physical damages done to the inside and outside of properties as a result of the violence. It wasn't about surveillance. I already mentioned that it was never intended to only include businesses that are in the 4th Aldermanic District. That was never ever the case whatsoever. In terms of other priorities where this money was originally budgeted for, I am open to any and all suggestions on other ways to fund this program. One idea that's come to me since we last drafted the substitutes is to use the leftover residual money from the Midtown Police Station construction, obviously money that we rejected in part at a recent council meeting for additional police equipment. So if there's a particular concern, even though when the mayor chose the funding source for this, she and staff worked very hard to make sure that it was capital budget funding for projects that were absolutely positively never occurring this year, whether it be work on a combined police and fire station on the north side, or again, whether it be additional LED replacement for libraries. That was the case where this money was largely coming from. If that's a concern from any of my colleagues, please let us know, and we will come up with other sources of funding for the program. Again, this is capital dollars, not operating dollars. So some of the wish lists that we've heard from in the public testimony and emails to us, of course, you all know the difference between capital and operating budgets and what we can spend items for and not spend items for. So let me just close and by saying that again, this program, the one that we're specifically voting on, is all about helping the small mom and pop businesses that are suffering from the rioting that occurred in our community. whether it be on State Street or elsewhere downtown, or again, I have no problem with saying that the rioting that occurred on the east side or west side or north or south sides of town as well. So I really would hope that you would continue, this committee would continue your support for this proposal and allow a favorable recommendation again to be made to all of our colleagues at our meeting tomorrow night. Thank you.
Thank you, Alder. Alder Evers, I see you, but I'm going to go to members of the body first. Alder Harrington McKinney.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I continue to be supportive of this resolution for 1, 2, 3. I'm going to go through my reasons. Is that MAD staff, and I want to say specifically MAD, has a way of putting everything on the table to review. And I go back to his statements, and he said, do we need a more refined proposal? And he acknowledged that it's not perfect and it needs some work. And he said that the recipients of the loan had to provide evidence of such repair. That was impactful for me, because oftentimes we allocate dollars and we don't expect an accountability of where the money went and how it was used and what was the impact. And so for him to say that the recipient had to provide evidence of repair, and the fact that racism has a cost. We've seen that. We need to stand it up. And then Jason came back of downtown Madison and said, we have the opportunity now to reimagine downtown Madison and cast a new vision for our city. That is huge. We've identified that there is no Black ownership, or there's no Black precedent in downtown Madison. And then we looked at not wanting to have an empty, boarded up downtown area. We don't want vacant buildings that are boarded up. We don't want some small mom and pop. And that's why I wanted Tiffany to say, who are these? We say small business owners and mom and pop, but we have to name the people who actually are occupying the property. And then also residents who are living above the property. And the final reason that I'm going to support it is that we as a city, we have appropriated billions of dollars to Judge Doyle Square and all that whole process. And in that, and I really do appreciate the Alder being inclusive and saying that we'll open it up, because it wasn't just downtown that was impacted by what we're talking about, but actually we are talking about downtown Madison, and we are talking about vitality of a community, and people are coming downtown because of the small mom pop businesses that are generating it. And so I'm going to support this. I continue to support it because I absolutely believe that we have an opportunity to reimagine downtown Madison, State Street, and what that looks like in the future. And if this allows some businesses that were on the cusp of saying that I'm closing and I'm not going to reopen, if that says to them, you are important and we see you, absolutely I'm going to support that. Also recognizing is that we have a lot to do going forward in terms of the cost of racism. And so we have to stand up and really look at that. But at this, I will continue to support this. The two resolutions should have been tied together and they weren't, but I absolutely am going to support the one that is before us right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Alder. Alder Furman.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to vote tonight to support this so at least it advances to the council for discussion. I'm going to take up Alder Revere on some of his suggestions, so I'm sure I'll be in touch to see how we can make some tweaks. I do think that State Street's an incredibly valuable asset for our city, and I do want to see it succeed. But I appreciate the comments tonight from Jason Elstrip as well as Alder Revere that we seriously really need to reimagine and reinvent what State Street is, because it's not necessarily a welcoming place for everybody in our community. Because it's tied to the money, I will say, I mean, we obviously are making this is a statement of priority for us by spending the money, capital money on this. Alder Revere talked a little about how capital and operating works, and I think there's certainly some confusion about that in the community. But we don't necessarily have to spend this money, even though we're getting it from other places. If we don't spend the money, then we don't borrow the money. And there are certainly lots of other priorities that we can spend this money on. So this is a decision that the council will have to make tomorrow. That's my feedback for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Alder. Alder Campbell. Oh, I'm sorry, Alder. There you go.
Okay, good. So I appreciate all the questioning and information that's come out in this discussion tonight, but my objections are on a more fundamental level than just the details of these programs. And Alder Revere, I understand why members of the community got confused about this was involved with purchasing surveillance equipment, because they conflated, I think, in their mind, the anonymous 19-point demand letter sent to the city, which included more demands for more police and more surveillance equipment, with what we're doing now. And I have to say, I was really shocked that the city would respond to an anonymous demand letter at all. And when I read the response, it started off saying that this downtown neighborhoods have the most investment. We have invested more in these neighborhoods than we invest anymore. And I thought the letter was going to go on from there saying, we're in a historic moment where this literally is how white privilege expresses itself through institutions, is investing in these neighborhoods that are mostly white. And, in some of the letters we received, our friend and colleague, Justice Castaneda, is quoted as, talking about the redlining that happened in this city and that effects of which are still here. So I thought that letter was going to go on to say, we're in a time where we really need to shift our priorities, and we're not going to basically respond to your anonymous 19-point demand letter. But it went on to explain how actually the city's response to the COVID pandemic, the most immediate responses were to support businesses. We're to support the businesses, not the people. And I think a lot of what we're hearing, or what we have heard throughout the month of June on the streets at night, is that these decisions we're making, that yes, we feel bad for businesses. Like, I'm a small business owner, and I would feel bad if my business was hurt or destroyed, but we've got to get out of this thinking and think more, really listen to what people are saying, really listen and understand what institutional racism is and means, and how in our little decisions like this, day to day to day, we continue to support that. So that's what my objection to this program is. I mean, we had earlier in this meeting, alders, questioning $350,000 payments out to organizations that are serving entire immigrant communities, like that. And now, $500,000. Maybe it isn't enough for businesses. So let's just listen to what we're saying, how we're making our decisions about what's important and what we value. And, this program is not, and the next item, it's not about reimagining downtown. It's about reinvesting in a downtown that was already struggling. It's about subsidizing property repairs and rents on a State Street situation where retail has been struggling for years. And I think it's really irresponsible for us to put, brand new entrepreneurs into that situation and to be subsidizing them to put them into that situation, because that larger context hasn't gone away. That larger economic context is still there. If we want to reimagine downtown, the city should be investing in purchasing those buildings, creating land trusts, stabilizing rents for both residents and commercial property owners, and really actually bringing our power to transform that place, not just to reinvest in a situation that is already really struggling. So those are my thoughts, and that is the reason why I'll be voting against this and the next item as well.
Thank you, Alder. Alder Evers.
Thank you, Mayor. And a couple of things. Thank you, Alder Furman, for making clear that opportunity cost is really something that needs to be considered, because whether it comes from the capital budget or the operating budget, it's really what else we could use that money for that counts. That's how we measure the value of the money that we're talking about now is the next best option. And Alder Revere, you and I have talked about this several phone calls, and I appreciate your willingness to have those deep conversations. And as you know, as a new alder, I take seriously the concerns of something that's in your district. Any one of you who are alders, if there is something in your district, I want to hear from you. I want to talk to you. If you reach out to me, I will get back to you. I will not ignore you. I know that it's important. So you and I have had long conversations about this. But with all due respect, it's been about downtown. It's really been driven by a sense of grievance from folks who were blaming the city for what happened. Because in that anonymous letter that was referenced, it talked about what the city let happen. And that's an ongoing narrative of folks who've been critical of the mayor, have been critical of the Common Council, have been critical of MPD. Does this, though, obligate, some would say it does obligate the city to pay for the damages that aren't covered by insurance. But, with 2020 hindsight, we don't know what would have happened if it would have been dealt with differently. The riots took place all across the country in dozens of cities. And it's a historical fact. As Dr. King said, that riots are the language of the unheard. And riots have taken place historically in the response to police brutality. The question remains, are we obligated then as a city with public funds to address the private harm? And I asked Matt Miklajewski what other cities, these cities throughout the United States, are doing in response to their private businesses. Is there a template that we can follow? And he was not able to answer that question. So in fact, we don't know what these other cities are done, but we're responding nonetheless to this sense of grievance that we are obligated to use public funds to take care of these influential businesses and property owners, not just mom and pop ones, but the influential voices of downtown businesses who have blamed the city, not just for the riots, but in the past have blamed the city for allowing homelessness to get away and again, create a sense of grievance. So yes, State Street properties were damaged by the riots, and yes, State Street businesses have been impacted by COVID, but it's also true that State Street was struggling prior to COVID. So the question is, why should the city do this? And as was referenced, Matt Miklajewski in his letter in response to the anonymous set of demands says specifically that Alder Kimball referenced, and the quote is, year after year, more city staff and resources from departments throughout the city are devoted to downtown than any other commercial corridor, and more efforts are focused on the broader downtown area than any other neighborhood in our city. And there was another telling email that was sent to all alders on this subject by Grant Fauci, who also spoke about the precedent and the expectation. And it was, I quote, to not protect our city's most significant economic engine, the people who define our city's heart and soul and a destination for everyone, would be a true injustice. I think that's not only speaking to a precedent, it really is speaking to a sense of privilege and an expectation that is really rooted in that word or phrase that we're getting more comfortable saying, and that's white supremacy. Justice Castaneda, the executive director of Commonwealth, did send a really telling email, and I think it's important just to read a portion of it because it gives a different narrative that talks about the history of State Street and why State Street is the way it is. I quote, "The history of Madison's downtown is one of exclusion, corruption, and of boosterism and land grabbing. That Madison was rife with redlining and racially exclusive deed restrictions is now well known. The areas along the isthmus and especially within immediate proximity to the Capitol were effectively handed off for political favor as the city was initially established. The neighborhoods immediately east and west followed suit by restricting access to land ownership to white residents until the late 20th century. The development of the downtown neighborhoods was done with deliberate exclusion of ownership and investment opportunities for Black families and families of color, and was concurrent with the lack of investment and peripheralization of the neighborhoods that house significant Black populations and other residents of color." And he wraps up by saying the residuals of this exclusion remain and are manifest in current challenges in our democratic processes and institutions as the downtown neighborhoods enjoy significantly more efficient transit systems, access to parks, open spaces, walkable neighborhoods, and political representation in elected positions, and in the multitude of boards, commissions, and committees that provide input on the city processes. Why is it the wrong thing to do? We heard from Grant Fauci why it was the right thing. We know the precedent that the city has always taken care of State Street. It's the wrong thing to do right now because it sends the wrong message. We're grappling with racist policies, a racist legacy of redlining and restrictive covenants. We're grappling, coming to terms with the fact that Madison is the capital city of the most racist state in the nation, not Alabama, not Mississippi, but by every metric, Wisconsin. We are the capital city of the most racist state in the nation. It sends the wrong message while Black-led agencies with a Black-led focus remain unfunded or not underfunded, not sufficiently funded, that there lacks at this present moment a Black economic development plan that's really thought out, worked out, and that we've made progress on and that we're implementing. The money was reduced from $500,000 to $250,000, and now we're talking about spending the other $250,000. And it feels somewhat to me, with all due respect to my friend Mike Verveer, as a little bit of kind of political cover to be able to get this to pass right now. But we're also told by Matt Miklajewski that the amount required might only be about $200,000. I suggest that rather than using the public sector to take care of this private need, the private sector is more than capable of doing so. I think a virtual cocktail party organized by my friend Jason Elstrip, perhaps with Grant Fauci, in an evening or a weekend could raise $200,000. After all, $200,000 is 1/10 of 1% of the money that the Fauci family donated to build Overture Center for the Arts. $200,000 from the private sector to take care of fellow private business owners is appropriate. But we send the wrong signal right now to use public resources to take care of these private businesses. And regarding the downtown equity plan, I'm going to suggest tomorrow evening that we refer that concept to the president's group that was established just last week, where that President Sherry Carter set up, so that rather than us telling kind of the Black community what we want to do with this money, that we invite Black leaders and Black business people to the table and tell us what they need. $250,000 is not really enough. We should be thinking about reparations budgeting, and some of us are starting to talk about that, about the millions of dollars that are necessary to address a public school system that currently that 90% of Black boys and girls and brown boys and girls are not reading at grade level. And that somehow or another, the Madison power structure, of which I'm a part, has been content up to this point to let that status quo prevail. So that's what should get us angry and upset, not that these windows were broken. And in fact, if what comes out of this council is one of the first efforts that comes out post the protests and post George Floyd, who, let me remind you, it was 8 weeks ago today that he was murdered. If our efforts and resources are directed towards fixing broken windows, rather than the reasons why those windows were broken in the first place, we will have committed a grave injustice. Thanks.
Thank you, Alder. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, I suspect that there will be a request for a roll call. So I'll ask staff to mute themselves. I will unmute you all. The motion is to approve item 17. And I'll ask staff to call the roll. All those in favor, aye. Those opposed, no, as your name is called.
Alder Carter?
Aye.
Alder Carter is aye. Alder Furman?
Aye.
Alder Furman votes aye. Alder Kimball?
No.
Alder Kimball votes no. Alder Harrington McKinney?
Aye.
Alder Harrington McKinney, aye. Alder Moreland?
Aye.
Alder Moreland, aye. Alder Verveer?
Aye.
Alder Verveer, aye. Mayor, the vote is 5 in support, 1 no.
Thank you. That motion passes. And that takes us to item 18. We do have registrants for this item. So on item 18, which is Legistar 61060, a second substitute amending the capital budget, appropriating funding for the Downtown Recovery Program and the Downtown Equity Program. First registrant is Jason Ilstrup of West Washington Ave in support, wishing to speak, representing Downtown Madison Incorporated. And our second registrant is Jenny Gao.
Jason, you're unmuted.
Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
All right. I don't need to speak again. My statement is the same as it was for the last item, but thank you very much for the time. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Next is Jenny Gao of Dayton Street in opposition, wishing to speak, to be followed by Shadira Kilfoy Flores. Jenny, are you still with us?
Yes, I'm here.
Go ahead.
Okay. Yes, I'm Jenny Gao. I am here in opposition to 61060, which would appropriate $500,000 from public services and use it for private businesses. 61060 would pull funds away from uses for engineering, the library, and unrestricted funds for the city. It would take $500,000 away from other districts and put it into District 4 with no comparable support in other districts. It is morally unethical, especially during a pandemic, to reallocate funds from public infrastructure towards the benefit of private property. City departments are already facing a 5% budget cut. On July 9th, the Madison Public Library Board met to review options to eliminate staff positions and community programming in order to meet a budget cut of $900,000. 61060 is using $120,000 from the library neighborhood LED upgrade that could have been reallocated to prevent some of those cuts. 61060 is using $275,000 from Engineering Facilities Horizon at a time when the Streets Division is facing a $1.4 million cut and the Parks Division is facing an $800,000 cut. 61060 is using $128,000 of unrestricted city funds, leaving only $23,000 of unrestricted funds during a pandemic. The crux of this issue remains the subsidizing of private property ownership with public tax dollars. 61060 claims to support small downtown business owners, with 41 business owners indicating that they will have difficulty reopening and may close permanently. But there is at best flimsy evidence that providing public tax dollars to repair buildings would help any of these 41 State Street businesses survive the pandemic. For all we know, we are only helping to repair the buildings with no guarantee of security and longevity to the business owners, but a guaranteed benefit to the owners of those commercial properties. Finally, I wish to call out the manner in which the city is trying to pass the use of public funds for private property. Today is the first time there is a document explaining the Downtown Equity Program that the community has not had proper time to review. There is no document describing how funds will be used for the Downtown Equity Program, and it seems irresponsible to lock up $250,000 for new entrepreneurs to open businesses in the most expensive part of the city during a pandemic. Please recall that $128,000 are coming from unrestricted city funds. It was clear from your rationalizations on 60995 that many of you are still not listening to us. Of the registrants, the alders only named Tiffany Kenny and Jason Ilstrup in their follow-up discussions, two white people who represent downtown, and yet you claim that your goal is equity. Again, the crux of this issue remains the pulling of funds from public infrastructure and using it to subsidize private property. All of this is only treating symptoms of a much deeper rooted cause. In conclusion, I oppose 61060 and the misuse of public tax dollars for private property benefit. I yield my time. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Shadira Kilfoy Flores of Wilson Street in opposition, wishing to speak, to be followed by Allison Bellburn.
Shadira, you should have a prompt to unmute yourself.
Shady, do we have you with us? All right, let's keep trying, and we'll go on and come back if we get you unmuted. So Allison Bellburn of Mifflin Street in opposition, wishing to speak, to be followed by Alexandra Wilburn.
Looks like we don't have an Allison present. We do have a Alexandra.
Alexandra Wilburn of Gorham Street in opposition, wishing to speak, to be followed by Christopher Patterson.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. I would just like to start by saying, number one, truly the largest reason is because of the pandemic. There's lots of talk of, oh, there was damage, stuff stolen. Yeah, that did happen. But then this, like the businesses crying out for money, was going to happen anyway. So you're just setting yourself up for businesses to continually ask you for money because flu season is coming up. There is no vaccine. And as we know that everything is going up, I do appreciate the clearing up that it was the surveillance issue wasn't a thing. That's awesome. I do appreciate that. And the other thing about the businesses is, well, they should have had pandemic insurance, right? Or police brutality comes to a boiling point, right? Because that's what our municipal government tells all the people that are living on the streets outside of the buildings you want to give money to. And a lot of people that are disenfranchised are sick and can't afford to get care, and they can't work because they can't afford to get care. I hear, I don't remember your name, Alderman. You said that since the 29th or whatever, you've been talking to business owners that are upset. I moved here a year ago. I skateboard around town. I have befriended many of the disenfranchised people. In fact, one of those first nights, I make $19 an hour, and I just got out of school recently, and I dropped $250. So a pregnant woman who has sustained lots of violence against her in her life, I bought her a hotel room. So I feel like if I, a relatively poor person, can spend $250 on the fly for one woman, a entire city government could drop $250,000 to house people, to help them get off drugs, to actually provide proper mental health care, including the fact, taking into account that white people cannot properly be psychologists and counselors for Black people because they do not understand the oppression and the effect of white supremacy terrorism on their lives. By the way, stable, healthy, housed people give back to society more than any one business ever could. I heard something about the economy. Well, economies thrive when people thrive, and the people are not thriving. The tourism of downtown, number one, a lot of the homeless people that live down there get the police called on them by white people from out of town because they're mentally ill, and people get triggered and bad things happen, and then those people end up going to jail because of tourism. I would like to take anyone on this panel listening to this a tour of the city that I have seen skateboarding around at 3 a.m. at night. I can tell you where people sleep when it's cold. Speaking of getting cold, do you think during a pandemic when flu season is people are going to be wanting to go downtown? Giving money to start businesses right now is just not a good idea. I work in advertising. It is a terrible, terrible, terrible idea. The ideal America is where we make sure citizens aren't starving. That's the entire point of community. So I actually went back that first day when I heard people raining tear gas. I poured water in some 19-year-old's eyes for 30 minutes as he was just absolutely sobbing. And I watched as these primarily like young teen adult people. I'm a communications scholar, and this is a civil rights movement, mass media. So I wanted to see it. I wanted to see it for myself. I watched the reaction as the large mass of people were realizing these people that were gassing them were not doing a single thing about any looting, they weren't standing in front of the buildings. So those businesses should sue MPD for not protecting their property, for just gassing people. Also, the mayor at one of the last meetings, you said that we're protesting for George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, and you couldn't even say Tony Robinson Jr.'s name. That really made me physically sick. You all are calling for a community to trust you and the police as an institution, while Matt Kenney, who has a Medal of Valor for murdering someone and both murders,
Alexandra, you have about 30 seconds left.
Okay, I would just like to say I oppose this. Give money to the community, and rest in peace, Tony Robinson. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next is Christopher Patterson of Dayton Street in opposition, wishing to speak, to be followed by Sierra Helena Kalia Saplin.
Outstanding. So you should be able to hear me now. Is that correct?
Correct.
Outstanding. Hello, my name is Christopher S. Patterson, and I'm representing myself in opposition of item 61060. I have already voiced my opposition to item 60995, which would be funded by this item 61060. As such, my time will be spent specifically discussing why I believe that the funds indicated within 61060 should not be removed from the city's libraries and engineering, and instead should be reallocated to different items within those organizations. Let me be clear. As an entrepreneur, I understand the difference between capital and operating budgets. And this rhetoric alluding otherwise about members of the public is plainly intellectually dishonest politicking. I am arguing that it is immoral to take these funds away from the public for the people, to subsidize private businesses and private property owners, no matter the district. This sends the wrong message. I would like to begin by addressing the changes to item 61060 that have occurred since the week of July 13th, 2020. Specifically, the allocation of a downtown equity program, which contemplates the allocation of funds during some future state in which COVID-19 has sufficiently quelled. Let me state clearly again, this program represents a misguided allocation of funds. The city itself, quote, recognizes the limitations of opening a new business during this current COVID-19 pandemic, end quote, which is an acknowledgement that funds allocated into this downtown equity program will sit idle for the foreseeable future. Purposely locking up public funds at a time when we must make a full force effort to actively reduce the suffering of our population during a pandemic is irresponsible. There is no reason to lock away funds for some future project when there are social and equity needs that should be addressed right now, today. Now, with regards to my broad opposition to item 61060, I am speaking specifically to address burdens and the mitigation of unintended consequences that would arise from this item. I have here a printout of slides used by the Madison Public Library Board during their July 9th, 2020 meeting, where they grappled with how best to continue serving the public considering the recent reduction in their operating budget. In short, the library explored various options, all of which resulted in hundreds of thousands fewer library visits in 2021. Libraries are among the few places where a public individual can go to spend time without needing to spend money. Reduction in library access will certainly disproportionately affect vulnerable populations. Regarding the funding to be removed from the city's engineering, a cursory look at the status of our city's infrastructure should indicate to any reasonable person that there are places we can and should improve upon. Consider as one specific example, stormwater management and the fact that East Mifflin Street, East Dayton Street, and North Blair Street all struggle with flooding and impassable conditions during even a moderate rainfall. In closing, I'm opposing item 61060 on the grounds that public organizations being asked to sacrifice, they can make better use of the funds to benefit the public than can a handful of private businesses. Thank you. I yield.
Thank you. Next is Sarah Helena Kalia Saplin of Fish Hatchery Road in opposition wishing to speak, to be followed by Tiffany Kenny.
Hello. Oh, sorry. Dogs, be quiet. Hello, this is Kailea again. I already spoke on the item earlier, so I have nothing new to add there. I would just like to echo the remarks from Alders Kemble and Evers, who spoke after. They had a lot of good things to say, and I hope you all are thinking about that. I also want to echo community members Jenny and Chris, who just spoke. I also encourage you all to take up the offer Alder Revere made on finding funds from somewhere else. It's a pretty bad look when we are clearly taking money from other Madison neighborhoods to fund, we'll say, the downtown area in quotes. You can talk about the differences within that if you like. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Tiffany Kenny of West Washington Ave in support wishing to speak, representing Madison Central Business Improvement District, to be followed by Martin Lackey Sr.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thanks everybody. I will be short since we have, I've taken a lot of your time already. I just want to one more time underline the economic importance of all of this. You know, Dane County is a large county, and 10% of the tax base for this county comes from the small geography that makes up the Business Improvement District. And so I'm just hopeful that we can figure out the correct path to create a strong, equitable, and inclusive downtown that keeps that in mind, that reminds us that 10% of all those services that are very important to our people come from that resource. And with that, I will just, I've definitely had enough of your time today. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Martin Lackey Sr. of Salemo Court in Middleton in opposition wishing to speak, to be followed by Sam Eberly.
Hi, hello everyone. This is Martin Lackey, Lions Realty and Investments. I'm in opposition of the downtown efforts. I was a part of the co-lead of the board for the Boys and Girls Club to come up with the money raised for the efforts. I also spoke to Mr. McKinney about the efforts of him helping to pay. And I do not believe that the amount of money should be allocated for those businesses downtown. Understandable that they had to go through some hardship, but I've personally been downtown a few times and have seen the so-called damage or the so-called efforts that have been made. And I will oppose anything about people saying that they're saying they got more than $2,500 worth of damage. So again, I would ask that money be put into more developmental programs, such as financial literacy programs for minorities, and programs strictly based for minority home ownership. There's not enough programs in town to accommodate accommodate Black folks or minorities, and this issue needs to be addressed. I've taken a personal interest in this because I see the biggest wealth gap. We have literally one real estate developer in all of Dane County, and his project is in Middleton. And there's not many more developmental. There's not many developmental things in Dane County to address the big housing divide that we have. Madison and Dane County has the biggest wealth gap amongst my Black folks and white people in the nation. It also has the biggest gap between home ownership compared to white people in the nation. So I again ask if that money can be put to more important things that I do believe that some of the business owners downtown will agree to, because they agreed to having some money go to the Black chamber and the Latino chamber. So I do believe that they will have no issue with more funding going toward maybe some internships, or maybe maybe even with the businesses not opening, maybe those being some incubator spaces. I've spoken with a few people about this already. There's a few spaces downtown that can be identified very quickly and easily that could be utilized for minority business or to teach about minority leadership. I do believe that if some money was put to this, that we could close the wealth gap and we could make sure things are happening in Dane County. I do a lot of volunteering and a lot of stuff in Dane County, and I hear a lot of back talk. I go to a lot of meetings where people are just talking, and I hear a lot of talking, as I always do, and I don't see the work. I'm in the streets almost every day with the people that are the most affected with this, and I can tell you that they don't see none of the so-called money that the community is so-called needs. I am doing my personal report about Black people feeling included in the space downtown, and out of 20 people or 21 people, not one person has said they feel included with being downtown. These ages have ranged from 18 to 28. So again, you guys we're trying to address the need for inclusion, and we're trying to address the need for closing wealth gaps and things that should be important instead of surveillance. I think that there should be some things that should be more important than some business owners getting some money that I don't feel as though they really need to begin with. Now I'm done with my rant. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Sam Eberly of Spate Street in opposition, wishing to speak, to be followed by Ryan Eichholt.
There's nobody here by that name.
All right. So Ryan Eichholt of Maple Avenue in opposition, wishing to speak, to be followed by Avalon Zimmerman.
Ryan is also not here, as well as Avalon.
Okay. So Tara Federoff of East Wilson Street in opposition, wishing to speak.
It looks like she is also not here.
All right. Did we try again for Shadira Kilfoy Flores?
Let's give it another try.
Yes, please. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Excellent. So I've been providing childcare for both marches. Both marches today being in support of firing Matt Kenny and in support of Black Lives. Here in Madison, State Street represents a lot. I was born and raised here. My daughter's been born and raised here. She's now a senior at the UW. What State Street symbolizes is the epitome of white privilege in Madison. The speaker who just got done speaking, I've known him for 15 years. He's one of the very few Black realtors that we have in our city. And he's concerned. He's concerned that there are not enough Black homeowners or business owners. When we're talking about disparities and we're talking about businesses, these are not businesses or people who are being included. So we're talking about spending $500,000 on businesses who don't welcome, who don't invite, who don't include, who don't hire Black employees. I spent a lot of time on State Street in my high school years, and then just now trying to help repair some the damage and the healing that needed to be done with these young people. These businesses will be okay. Most of them are big box businesses that will be okay. We absolutely need to be responsible in the ways in which that we are spending citizens' money, the way that we're investing. We need to absolutely stop investing in these big box businesses and stop giving money to these business owners who won't even rent to Black businesses. You know, up and down Willie Street, I used to have tons of Black neighbors. Now I hardly have any Black neighbors. They're all being gentrified out. And that's exactly what State Street is. If you want to talk about doing things on State Street and the things that need to happen, it needs to be more Black owned businesses, and there needs to be more inclusivity. And that is not part of this discussion by you guys. What we have to do is we have to be more strategic in the ways in which we care for one another. I've been so impressed with the way that people have been taking care of one another through COVID. And it's not because the businesses are getting big loans. It's because of moms sharing food with other moms. You know, that's how we're getting through this. We're getting through this by looking out for each other, and giving $500,000 to businesses is not really looking out for the people who are in most desperate need in this community. So I have to say that I'm in opposition of this. There is no way that we should be investing in businesses when we are not investing in people. Thank you for coming back to me. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Glad we got you. All right, we also have several folks available to answer questions. Amy Bassel of Richard Street in opposition. Alex Leroy of Allen Boulevard in Middleton, neither supporting nor opposing. Justin Rabensdorf of Fell Road in opposition. And Joshua Ponce Sierra of Sherman Terrace in opposition. Are there questions for any of our registrants? Alder Harrington McKinney?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I don't know the name of the registrant, but he spoke just before the last presenter, and he talked about the wealth gap and talked about housing and home ownership. Is that
Martin Lackey?
Martin Lackey.
Go ahead.
Is he still there?
He's still there, Martin.
Yes, Martin.
You should be unmuted.
Still here. Sorry. I'm
Okay.
here.
Okay. Martin, I was very interested in your talking about the lack of home ownership. Could you say more about that wealth divide and how home ownership plays into what we should be envisioning in the new map that we keep talking about creating?
Yes, I have no problem with that. So I've done, personal research. I'm a former dry cleaner owner. So I took it as being a personal drive for the lack and also actually the disrespect I personally feel and see with the wealth divide in Dane County, to the point where I've created my own workshop. I've created workshops called, the Easy Bake Government Series, where I try to teach minorities, or basically Black folks, about the importance of wealth building, the RBICs of wealth, just to show us about credit and the importance of home ownership, things that I wasn't really raised and things that I yearned for and needed in the community that I had to actually go to jail and go to prison and learn about for. So I've done research and proved that 1 out of 5 Black people actually own their home, and 1 out of 7 and 1 out of 8 on average actually do any real estate investing past that point. So even though we do get home ownership, we still lack the necessary tools of trade to actually build wealth to pass down to our kids. We often sometimes pass down debt instead of wealth, mainly in Dane County, because there are no programs that's physically based about we're going to build wealth in real estate for minorities and Black folks. I've literally worked with all the major nonprofits in this town. I've sat down with some of the nonprofit leaders just to find out specifically what's going on. And again, I was not impressed. I was actually a little disappointed and disrespected, because I feel as though there's a yearning need in Madison that no one is even talking about. There's a ton of developments going on in Dane County, going up and down Park Street, where Black folks actually live, that we're getting pushed out and rezoned for. There's buildings going up that there's investment groups can be put together to make sure that this doesn't happen, that we're not involved in. There's rents going up month after month, and cost average rents going up, just strictly because landlords are following the trend of the exact sciences, and the people with the more than $50,000 worth of income are coming in. Most Black people or most minorities can't afford $1,100-$1,200 for a two bedroom. But those are the times we live in now. Most minorities can't afford to live even in Dane County anymore because we're being pushed out of certain regions and certain areas that we used to thrive in, namely Park Street. I personally have a group of investors that's trying to get some land and trying to get property on Park Street just to address this exact issue, because this has been my drive for years now, because I've seen and I've done my own research and I've seen that it doesn't exist in Madison. And actually, I was sitting here talking about allocating $500,000 to businesses when that money can be allocated to financial literacy programs, close the wealth gap. It's kind of disrespectful to Black folks, especially with the stuff that's going on right now. Now, excuse me for being emotional, but I think there should be some things. I think there should be some things focused on and paid attention to in this town, and that is not being paid attention to and not being cared about. And and I'm gonna just say this: the so-called, anointed Negroes. There's certain organizations and certain people in this town that get money and get certain resources. They get the same resources and it's not addressing the actual issue. And even if they are, and there's still not enough resources and not enough people to address the issue, even if it was to be addressed. So again, that is one of my drives to make sure that since nobody else is going to care about something, that there's a whole saying I remember: if you don't see it, invent it. So regardless of what happens, it's going to happen at some point, with the city's help or not.
Thank you, Martin. I asked for him to speak because there are some key things that I wanted the body to hear. Is that one, he was a business owner. Two, he's a Black male, and three, he reinvented himself because he served a prison sentence. And so I wanted you to hear when opportunities are offered to our community, they do thrive. And so, Martin, thank you for sharing, because that was very important for you to be seen as what we want the future of Madison to really encompass. So thank you for signing up and taking the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Alder. Alder Moreland.
I want to just say two quick things. One, I supported item 17-60995 because I think it's important enough to go to the entire council body. As it is now, when I thought about perhaps coming up with an amendment, I do not plan on supporting this at the full council, but did want my colleagues to be able to hear the arguments and have the opportunity to vote. Regarding 61060, I don't want to not support this, but I do want it to take a different form. And so I do want this to also go to council to have a more robust conversation. Everything Mr. Lackey said is absolutely correct. And all of the other speakers' registrants as well. It's absolutely correct. And I have to also thank Alders Evers and Kimball for your words. But we really have to think about what's important in this moment. I wholeheartedly feel for the business owners that sustained damage to their businesses downtown. But from what I heard from Tiffany, that we're not talking about that great population of people, and we're very focused on that, but very abstract about where this other 250,000 may go. So I really want to flesh that out before wholeheartedly supporting it, but I will support it this evening so that it will be able to go to the full body. Thank you.
Thank you, Alder. All right. Are there any other questions or discussion?
I have a comment to make.
Alder Carter?
Mayor, thank you. I think that the Downtown Equity Program, there's some merit to it. My issue with that is, do we know
I'm sorry, Alder. This is my error, but I believe we need a motion in a second before we move into discussion. We sort of slid from questions for registrants, and so let's. Can we get a motion?
Yes, I just slipped in with everybody else. Move to adopt item 18-61060.
Alder Verveer.
Second, second substitute resolution.
Thank you, Alder. So moved and seconded to adopt the second substitute. And now Alder Carter.
Well, I was just going to say that, it's nice for us to want to believe that there are people of color, African American business owners who want to move downtown and specifically move to State Street. But I haven't heard any, what do I want to say? I don't want to say evidence, but any surveys that have happened that says this is true. So I'm just wondering, is there a way to separate this out so we can do more in depth? And maybe this is to Matt, if he's still around, I don't know. So we can get some more information on whether there is interest in this, or is this something that we, the field of dreams, if we build it, they will come?
Thank you, Alder. I believe Matt can address that.
Yeah, thank you, Alder Carter. So I think, there was a comment made earlier in the evening about how, someone would not recommend to any business owner to open downtown at the moment in the middle of the COVID pandemic. And we absolutely wholeheartedly agree. From a staff perspective, now is not the time to be opening a brand new business in the downtown. Your point, Alder Carter, that you've raised, it is a very valid question about, whether or not there are, Black business owners that are interested in opening in the downtown. And, I'll be honest, the honest answer is, we don't know at this point in time. But I think one of the goals of the equity program is to have that outreach. And I know that there are Black business owners, for example, that are currently working with a group of existing downtown business owners to see who might be interested in a pop-up retail opportunity. Through the Market Ready program of the public market, we didn't know who the cohort of businesses were when we started that effort, but we, through that program, have been able to set up a very diverse cohort of businesses that would be interested in a food-based business, possibly in the public market. So I think the goal of the equity program at the moment is not to find a Black business owner who is interested in opening their business on State Street tomorrow or next week, or even in 2020, but to begin to very proactively and in a very forward-looking manner identify a cohort of Black entrepreneurs that may be interested in moving into downtown in the years ahead. In other words, to take this time in 2020 to lay the groundwork for future opportunities. And, as with the Market Ready program, not every entrepreneur that went through the Market Ready program has an interest in ultimately ending up in the public market, assuming the public market is built. In a similar manner, we may find a cohort of entrepreneurs of color who we work with through this effort, where some of those entrepreneurs may not locate in the downtown, but can still greatly benefit from this program, and really looking at this program as a business ready program. Admittedly, a focus on downtown, but that's not to say that we won't have some successful entrepreneurs that decide to locate their business elsewhere in the city.
Thank you, Matt.
Thank you, Alder. Alder Verveer.
Thank you, Mayor. I do have a question or two for staff, please. So owing to the fact that several of the community members that testified this evening had concerns about the source of funds that are referenced in this second substitute resolution, I was hoping that either Matt or Dave or Laura or even you, Your Honor, could, number one, explain where the source of funds that is suggested here came from, because admittedly, I personally was not part of the conversation in terms of choosing where the funds would be derived from. And then as a follow-up in the response, could we also have a clear explanation of that keyword unrestricted and for that matter, uncommitted funding that is referenced in the fiscal note for the capital revolving loan fund, because that again was something that was articulated in the public testimony as being very concerning, that some of this fund is clearly unrestricted and uncommitted and should go to other purposes.
Laura, do you want to take that?
Sure. So as it pertains to the source of capital projects that were identified, we went through a list of all of the capital projects to analyze one based off of the status and what was anticipated for the rest of 2020. And so we were able to produce a list of, I think that there were maybe 5 projects or so that had sufficient balances that could potentially be sources for this project, and then presented those as options. I think we landed on the Horizon List and library LED projects. In the case of the Horizon List planning item, that was a brand new item in the 2020 budget. That amount that was put in 2020, we weren't quite certain. The Horizon List is brand new in 2020, and so we weren't quite certain exactly what financial resources would be needed in order to support getting those capital projects off the Horizon List. So in that case, with the Horizon List planning at the time, based off of the timing of this, agencies had submitted their 2021 capital budgets, and the items that were on last year's Horizon List that needed engineering support had already had their support. And so that was why that was identified as a source. That project engineering put in a request for the necessary level of funding in 2021 and beyond. In the case of the neighborhood LED project, that too is something that the library indicated was really looking like it was going to be more of a 2021 project. And so working with them, we were able to determine whether or not the appropriation in 2020 was actually needed in order to complete the project based off of the realistic timeline. In regards to the unrestricted cash balance that was remaining in the capital revolving loan fund, the source of that funding is payments from prior year amounts that were restricted and remain within that fund. And our estimated balance reflects all of the commitments for that funding that have been appropriated. And so the balance that you're seeing here is what is left that has not been appropriated and does not have an identified use that meets the restricted requirements of the overall fund.
Thank you, Laura. So for example, again, referring to the public testimony, and I always certainly appreciate all the public involvement that we have, including absolutely tonight, even if we respectfully agree to disagree on the topics of the day. Here, specifically, you'll recall, Laura, that arguments were made that the operating budget shortfall that the library board found themselves in, and obviously Alderperson McKinney is a member of the library board, but the library board presentation that was referenced in the testimony tonight and so forth, could the use of the capital revolving loan fund be used, for example, to help the public library deal with 2021 estimated shortfalls?
No, because those are operating shortfalls in the city's operating budget and are a result of projected expenditures in 2020 not meeting available revenues.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Are there any further questions?
No, thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Alder. Alder Harrington McKinney.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I did have and thank you for referencing the library board. I did have a conversation with the director specifically when I saw that funding was removed from the library, and the director was comfortable in looking at that more in line with 2020. And he said that positionally they would be more prepared for that. And so he did concur with that move. And then secondly, I wanted to reconfirm, is the official title of the unrestricted funds, is it called a rainy day funding? Is that synonymous, or is that something else? I just want to clarify, because I'm familiar with the unrestricted fund, but rainy day funds came up in some of the discussions that I listened in on. But you could define the two.
Yeah. So typically when people refer to the city's rainy day fund, they're referring to the unrestricted general fund balance. And that is the balance that we talk about in terms of maintaining our policy goal of always making sure that we have 15% of our budget expenditures available in fund balance. In this case, the reserves that are being applied to fund the appropriation, they're actually restricted, legally restricted in the city's loan fund. And so that's part of why the ordinance change was necessitated. And so under the new ordinance establishing the parameters of this program, use of that restricted funding will be appropriate.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alder. Are there any other questions for staff? All right, seeing none, it has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Alder Verveer.
Thank you again, Mayor. And I think we all know where the vote will be momentarily on this, so I don't want to take too much time. I just want to state very personally to all of you that the idea of an equity program really came from a very personal place where, as you might have seen in a newspaper article that was published today, I felt that the original proposal was tone deaf. And so it honestly hurt me a little when tonight it was alleged that this is a cover, so to speak, for a main goal of helping State Street merchants recover. That is not the case. I genuinely, truly asked city staff to please help find a way to rebuild the greater downtown area in a more diverse and inclusive way. In other words, stressing diversity and inclusion to make downtown for the better. And that's where this came from. I mentioned earlier the very real issue that's been discussed tonight, that there are overwhelming economic barriers and systematic racism for entrepreneurs of color, especially Black entrepreneurs. And that's why I thought that we need to try to respond to that. We need to make the downtown a much more diverse and inclusive place. And that's what this is all about. If the recovery program idea falls by the wayside, so be it. I still believe in my heart that the equity program could play a very, very helpful and profound improvement to make, again, the downtown more diverse and inclusive. And I know staff is very excited to begin work on it. And so I really do hope that you will support it this evening. And I invite any and all of my colleagues to please reach out to me tonight after the meeting, tomorrow during the day, with your ideas on how to make any of this legislation better so that we have a potential third substitute ready tomorrow night for our colleagues' consideration. So thank you for your support. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Alder. Right, is there any other discussion? Is there any objection to recording unanimous vote on item number 18? Alder Kemble requests a roll call. So it has been moved and seconded to adopt item 18. All those in favor, aye. Those opposed, no. As your name is called, you are unmuted, and I'll ask staff to call the roll.
No.
Do you want these sauces?
Alder Carter? Alder Carter?
Aye.
Alder Carter votes aye. Alder Furman?
Aye.
Alder Furman votes aye. Alder Kimball?
No.
Alder Kimball votes no. Alder Harrington McKinney?
Aye.
Alder Harrington McKinney votes aye. Alder Moreland?
Aye.
Alder Moreland votes aye. Alder Verveer?
Aye.
Alder Verveer votes aye. There are 5 ayes, 1 no, Mayor.
Thank you. With 5 ayes, that item passes, and that brings us to item number 20. We do have registrants. So we will start with Christopher Patterson of East Dayton Street in support, wishing to speak. And that's the only person wishing to speak. So, Mr. Patterson?
Yes, thank you. I should be unmuted now, is that correct?
Correct.
Thank you. So I'll be brief in this one. Hello, as you may be aware, my name is Christopher S. Patterson, and I'm representing myself to speak in support of item 61252. As a veteran of the U.S. Navy submarine service, I feel comfortable stating that the military and the police serve different functions within society. The transfer of military equipment to the police seems to blur those roles to the detriment of our populace. The militarization of the police is one of many factors contributing to the current social unrest, and an excellent first step towards correcting this current state of affairs is to stop our police force from receiving military property. In closing, policing in partnership with our community should not and does not require military equipment. Thank you. I yield.
Thank you. We also have Justin Ravensdorf of Fell Road in support, available to answer questions, and a number of other registrants not wishing to speak. I believe you have all received the registration list. Are there questions for any of our registrants? Alder Kemble, do you have a question?
I'm sorry, no, I wanted to make a motion.
Okay. I see no other questions for registrants, so Alder Kemble?
Yeah, the author of this had a family obligation and couldn't be here today, so I would like to move to refer this to our next meeting.
So the motion is to refer. Is there a second, Alder Verveer?
Second.
So moved and seconded to refer to the next Finance Committee meeting. Is there discussion? Seeing none. Is there any objection to a unanimous vote in favor of referral to the next Finance Committee meeting? Seeing none, we'll record a unanimous vote in favor of referral of item number 20 to the next Finance Committee meeting, and we'll move on to item number 21. We do have registrants on item number 21. So item number 21 is 61137, authorizing the termination of the contract with MMSD to provide school resource officers for high schools. We'll start with Peter Anderson of Bittersweet Place in opposition, wishing to speak. Peter, go ahead. We are having audio issues, Peter.
Peter, if you want to try to exit and call back, that might be helpful.
We're not able to hear you at all, Peter. We also have Justin Ravensdorf of Fell Road in support, available to answer questions, and a number of other registrants not wishing to speak. Do we want to try Peter again and see if there's any resolution?
So it looks like he jumped off. I assume maybe if we give him like a minute or two, he might hop back on.
Okay. Is there any objection to waiting to see if we can get this registrant back? All right, seeing no objection, we'll just stand informal for a minute and see if we can get this registrant back. In the meantime, Laura, can you confirm that we did send the registration list to the body?
That is correct. The list was distributed.
So that list of registrants should be in your email. And while we're waiting, Alder Carter, do you want to get a motion on the table?
Yes, I move adoption of item 21-61137.
Alder Revere?
Second.
Thank you, Alders. And staff, please do let me know if we get Peter Anderson back.
Yep.
We'll wait just a few minutes. I'm not seeing anyone come back with that name.
I'm not either.
So if Peter Anderson, if you're within the sound of my voice, I'd invite you to register for this at council or to
He
email.
actually just popped up, Mayor.
Excellent. Let's see if we can get him back.
Peter, can you hear us? Peter, you are unmuted on our end.
You may have a prompt to unmute yourself, Peter. Try now. All right, we're not hearing anything on this end. So again, my apologies. And we'll ask you if you could email all alders at cityofmadison.com with your comments and to register for this item when it comes in front of the council as well. My apologies that we can't seem to make the technology work for you tonight. All right, so we do have a motion and a second. Are there questions for staff? Or is there any discussion? Seeing none, is there
Mayor,
any?
I have a question.
I'm
for
sorry,
staff.
Alder Carter, go ahead.
Would this be to Attorney Haas? I just want to know what is the termination date?
Might be for Attorney Paulson or Attorney Haas.
If they're not,
Yeah, I can answer that. It's within the resolution. It would be after the council votes on it. I don't think it's going up to the council tomorrow. I don't think it's on their agenda. I didn't check, but it would be at the council meeting, I believe, in August. So it would be voted in August. The school board already voted to terminate the contract. So this is just our vote to terminate the contract.
Okay, thank you. I thought it was going to be on, if it was on tomorrow, I just wanted to know what the date was. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alder and staff. Are there any other questions or any discussion? All right, seeing none, is there any objection to recording unanimous vote in favor on item 21? Seeing no objection, we'll record a unanimous vote in favor of item 21. And Alder Moreland, a motion?
I move to adjourn.
Alder Carter?
Second.
Moved and seconded to adjourn. Is there any objection to recording unanimous vote in favor of adjournment? Seeing no objection, we are adjourned. Thank you all very much and have a good night.
Good night.